Call this meeting to order. Chris, can you lead us in a pledge of
I
allegiance?
invite you to stand, face the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do a roll call.
Here.
Jerry Flanagan.
Not here.
Nancy Harris.
Here.
Chris Hill.
Here.
Chris Johnson.
Present.
Nick Johnson.
Present.
Thank you.
Anyone had a chance to review the January minutes?
Yes.
Any changes, alterations, amendments?
No,
Have a motion?
I motion to approve the January meeting minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain. Approval for today's agenda. Any additions, corrections, amendments? And Gary is here.
Sorry.
Have a
No
motion.
Changes. I motion to approve the agenda for March 7th.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions. Okay, public safety, Placer County Sheriff, there you go. Head on up here.
So regular person will be back next time. Just going over some statistics for the month of February from the 1st to the 29th.
And you might telling us your name for the
Sean.
minutes.
Sure. We've had a total of 3,426 incidents, 454 reports taken. 118 arrests for the month of February. 203 assists of additional agencies. 83 citations. And 264 suspicious activity calls. And 337 alarm calls and 543 traffic stops. And that is just for the month of February.
Okay, is that all Placer County?
That is for Placer County, yeah.
You see that's the entire, that's not just the Granite Bay area?
I could be mistaken,
Do we-
however, this is the information I have. Let me see if there's.
That's a lot of crime in Granite Bay.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah, I think it's the whole.
Could be mistaken. It's just that it's my first time.
You did say it was for the entire county. That sounds right.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to, let's see.
It's 114 arrests.
Now, this is probably just for Granite Bay. 41 reports taken. 32 suspicious activity calls. And 58 traffic stops and 8 arrests. And this is saying for the Granite Bay municipal area. So my initial ones was for the entire county.
Can we separate that from felony and misdemeanor? Or is that
That's
usually the first time?
That's a great question. However,
In this area.
it doesn't indicate as far as misdemeanors or felonies, I'm sorry.
any other questions from the board,
No.
from the audience? Yes, sir. You hand up?
Oh, no.
Oh,
God bless Sheriff Department.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
thank you. I don't see CHP here yet. Chief Doer of South Foster Fire.
Well, good evening, happy Thursday. Thank you all for coming. Man, you guys are drawing it out. You have to get a bigger room. My name is Mark Doer with the South Foster Fire District. I'm the fire chief there. We have a couple slides.
Yay.
So here's what we did in Granite Bay over the last month of February. We had about 300-ish calls, the majority of those medical in nature. You can see that was 198. The map on the right is a heat map. You can see where our hot areas are. Red is more calls, the light blue is less calls, so, the Douglas corridor, is a big area for us, as well as down there in the bottom of the map, bottom left is, WellQuest. We go there fairly frequently, and then you can see a little activity up there in the town of Loomis. Next slide, please. Like I said, 320 calls, I got it right, 62% medical, 41 of those are to a residential care facility. We did not have any that we billed for in the month of February. We had 4 fires, 13 false alarms, 70 good intent calls, and if you might not have noticed, we did have some weather over the last month, so we had 5 calls that we attributed to the weather. Bless you.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. District update, we're gonna have an open house this Saturday at Station 16, which is at 5300 Olive Ranch Road. That'll be open from 11 to 1. Fire station is open to everybody. Come in, meet your firefighters, walk around, check out the fire engine, bring the kids, bring the family. We'll have some hot dogs and hamburgers, some chips, some sodas, some water, some fire swag. Stop by, come in, introduce yourself, say hi. We'd love to see you all there. We have a district meeting on Wednesday at 6 o'clock. We have a master plan. We had a consultant come in and look at our operations, and they've provided some feedback. It's about 280 pages long. It should be out on the agenda today, I think. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about community facility districts. Hope to see as many of you there as are here. That would be fantastic. A couple tips or tricks this Saturday night. You will be changing your clocks forward. And change your clocks, change your batteries and your smoke detectors and your CO detectors. If you don't have a CO detector, please go get one. It's the silent killer. Spring cleaning. Spring is here, March 9th. So if you're cleaning, do some debris removal around your home. Get ready for fire season. If you're going to burn something, get your burn permit. They're good for a year. You can go online or stop by one of the fire stations and grab one. And if you're out and you feel confident and comfortable, clean your gutters and drains. That'll be fantastic for any future rain we have, as well as fire season. Those leads in the gutters are a big problem for us if something happens to burn. With that, that's all I have for this evening. I'll answer any questions that you all may have. Yes, sir, Mr. Virgil.
Yes, Chief, on your heat map,
Yes, sir.
there's a lot of heat right there at Cavad, Stallman and Auburn Folsom.
Gavin Stallman and Auburn Folsom. Yes,
That station is closed down,
that is closed right now.
and so are those traffic accidents at that location?
From that, I would believe they are, yes.
Okay.
And I'm hoping they got fixed. If you haven't noticed, those lights have been changed. We took out the blinky yellow lights. And so I think that hopefully we'll see a reduction in accidents there. Because it was very confusing, even for me who knew what it was. So I'm hoping you all benefit from that as well. Okay.
Sure.
Yes.
When are the burn permits required this spring? Because there's time period.
Yeah, so we will leave them open until the burn season stops, which is typically last year it was fairly late into June because we had all those late rains. We'll give you hopefully enough warning that you can burn off at the end. But in Granite Bay, there's a somebody help me out because I often get them confused.
15 days first.
The first 15 days of the month you can burn, and you can't burn the second 15, and get your burn permit and go on the website or go on the air pollution control to see if it's an okay burn day. We have a new website coming. I'm hoping it's going to be up by the end of the month. And there'll be a link in there that actually links directly into air quality or air pollution control, and you'll be able to see right away if it's a burn area. So stand by for that exciting news. And for those of you that are in the business community, we're actually starting to accept credit cards instead of just checks. So we're progressing from 1984 all the way into like 1997. So you don't have to find or open a checking account to pay for your fees for the district. That's probably just a few of you, but I'm super excited by that progress. Anything else? Cheryl first.
Your staff, and I know that, Sheriff said that they prison staff, they were having a problem, they've been adding people, but what is your staffing and your budget look like?
Yeah, so in terms of getting people in the door, it's very difficult, very competitive. The fire industry isn't what it used to be. You used to have long lines of people applying. We're currently trying to hire right now. I think we have 4 or 5 openings. we'll be lucky if we get 5 applications. It's just a hard time right now.
And are you funded for more?
That would be the positions that we're funded for right now. So we're doing our best.
Do you require a firefighter 1 and a paramedic?
Firefighter 1 and a paramedic currently. We also have a brand new model for us, which is if you're a paramedic without a firefighter 1, come in and we'll send you to school. And depending on how that goes, we're also looking at maybe some point in the future to open it up just to firefighter EMT and send people to paramedic school as well. Stand by on that one. We're working to broaden our pool. Because I know we're all having trouble in public safety doing some hiring. Yes, sir.
A lot of the calls are for the senior living facilities.
Yes.
How does that work in proportion to the assessments that come from those facilities?
So that's a great question. So they pay no more or less taxes than you all right now. We're working on a community facility district fee. So any new development in the community would actually start to contribute more to that. So something like a residential care facility, they would actually start contributing more based on their density, and hopefully that will offset some of their burden into the system. So we're looking at all kinds of different ways to help. I can't go back and unring the bell, but we're looking at ways going forward to help them, help us serve their facilities. Yeah. Anything else?
Thank you, Chief, and we're gonna expect these fancy presentations going forward.
We'll do our best. Thank you very much. I can't stay at night. I'll be here for a little bit, but thank you all.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Nick,
Enjoy the
just
rain.
really quick, is the Zoom on? Cause usually we take public comment from Zoom too.
Is there
Okay.
15 people watching.
anyone from
Okay.
Cal Fire on Zoom?
Anyone from Cal, I don't see the names that I recognize. If we have a Cal Fire rep on Zoom, you can raise your hand.
Okay, and I don't see anyone from CHP, so if they come, we'll come back to them. Any subcommittee reports?
Yes, I have 2 announcements, for the, Trails Committee. We were fortunate to have won a grant, for, community safe street assessment. So we are going to have our kickoff meeting tomorrow. It is sponsored through the UC Berkeley, but we're going to be working actually with a professional, traffic, company, and it is Fairs and Pures, so we will have our kickoff tomorrow. So I expect in April, I'll be able to give you an update on that. Our other committee that I'm involved in is the Community Plan Committee, and we have a meeting set up. It will be a face-to-face meeting on March 25th with Chris Schmidt and some of the other people from the planning department. A couple months ago, you heard about how we have to update our community plan. We're starting that process. Those are my updates.
I think the only thing that I have, and I'm chairing the traffic subcommittee, is we did put an announcement out that Kimley Horn was going to be present at this meeting to go over some options for improving traffic flow and traffic safety in our community. And unfortunately, they had a conflict at the last minute. So they committed to move and come to the next meeting. So I apologize if you're here for that, but it is going to be at the next meeting. It's well worth coming and listening to what they have to say. So that's all I have.
Anything else? Okay, next we're gonna open up to public comment. Public comment is limited to 15 minutes, and each individual person is limited to 3 minutes. If we have too much public comment, we will take up, so if we go over the 15-minute mark, we will put that at the end of the agenda. Most of you here are probably, I'm assuming, here for the rezoning. That public comment will be dealt with in that item. So we have 2 other items before that, so we're not taking any public comment on the rezoning. That will be held when we take up that matter. Given that, does anyone here have public comment? Brady.
It's an issue that goes beyond Granite Bay, but includes Granite Bay. If you haven't heard, there's an initiative underway to put a measure on the November ballot to return some teeth into our laws regarding shoplifting and drug abuse and a number of other things. If you listen to John McGinnis, you'll be hearing about it every day. I am a circulator of the petitions. I have them with me tonight. I can't pass this around, but afterwards, if you'd like to sign this petition, again, it will take all of this petty shoplifting that you can shoplift twice a day all year long and suffer no penalty. It will turn repeat offense into a felony, drug possession into a felony. So I have those. If you don't want to hang around tonight, next Thursday, there's a big drive at the Roseville Auto Mall. And you can drive through, sign the petition. Pretty much, I think they're starting at 10. John McGinnis and a number of other dignitaries, including, according to John, Supervisor Jones will be there. And you can drive through, sign the petition, be on your way. So, but it's for the better of Granite Bay and the rest of the state too. So come see me if you want. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay. For our first information item, it's a non-action item. Cavad, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, Zoom. I should check Zoom. Any public comment on Zoom?
Does he know him? Hold on. Steve, go ahead and unmute your mic and make your public comment or ask your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, I'd like to know how to find out more about the Trails Committee meeting and the grant from UC Berkeley.
Is there a
Have him,
that they can reach out to get information on that meeting?
yeah, so do you want to have him submit an email or something and I can respond to it?
Steve, would you be able to go on the county website and navigate to send an email to Supervisor Jones' office?
We'll connect you up.
We'll connect you, or if you'd like to, let's see, I don't want to put your email address in the chat. How about this? I'll put my phone number in the chat.
Yeah.
But then you can call me and I'll go through the information. Did you catch all that?
Because we're always looking for people that want to help out.
His name sounds familiar.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
Now we're gonna move back to item A, Cavad School Field Renovation and Tennis Court Repairs. We have Ted Rell. Ted here?
I am not as good looking as Ted Rell. My name's Andy Fisher. Ted had an appointment tonight he couldn't get out of, so I'm going to cover the next couple items on Ted's behalf. Andy Fisher, Parks Administrator for Placer County. I also like to introduce Sean Johnson in the back, who is our newest planner for parks in Placer County. So you'll see more and more of Sean's face as we go forward with all kinds of land use and project decisions. And then also here with me tonight is Melissa and Steve from the Eureka School District, who will be talking more about their project. I just want to introduce the project and the funding setting. You might recall, several years ago, we would come to the MACs with an action item request for recommendation on the expenditure of park fees. We learned since then that council has told us that those can't be action items; they need to be informational items. But what we do is take your input faithfully to our next step for these requests, which is to the Parks Commission, which will be March 21st, and then on to the Board of Supervisors for a final appropriation of funding. So the request before you tonight is for $950,000 in Area 10 park fees, which is your Granite Bay area, for renovation of the Cavad School field and the courts. So two projects, $850,000 for the field, $100,000 for the courts, combined request. This is pretty common with schools that we do joint use projects with. They come and ask the county for money for capital projects, and then they're committed to maintaining them over time. So it makes for a very efficient partnership. That comes with a contract that if the board so chooses to appropriate that money, we enter into a contract that requires the school to maintain it for a certain number of years, usually 20, that they allow public use outside of normal school hours. So that's the partnership that they're asking for. Your park fee account today has just over $2.5 million in it. So those fees come in at building permit or at lot division. So they're one-time fees, they're paid at one-time milestones, building permit or lot division. And therefore are intended for capital one-time expenditures. They're not intended for maintenance or ongoing expenses. $2.5 million is, you know, it's grown quite a bit. We haven't tapped that account for, I don't think, a couple of years. When we did our park and trail master plan studies over the past 6 or 7 years, 2 areas of recreational interest were very pronounced in your community. Trails were one and fields were another. Over any community in Placer County, your desire for additional field space was very much pronounced within the surveys that we conducted through Granite Bay. And so we're looking at these park fee accounts, very cognizant. We've been talking with Chris and the Trails Committee about trails needs. Completed the trail between Douglas Boulevard and Roseville Parkway along Barton Road last year. We're now looking at right-of-way needs along Eureka Road. So we're really looking at filling in the gaps and making trail circulation throughout Granite Bay is another one of our priorities. But here tonight, we're talking about fields. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa and Steve to come up and talk more about the project itself, and I'll hang out for any kind of questions.
You have some handouts here too, if you want to pass them down as well.
We have the handout.
All right, so first, I wanted to show you how our field looks right now, and we have a lot of people in the community that actually use this field, from lacrosse, baseball.
Can the council
soccer,
have the handouts?
and a lot of other groups. Sure, I have one right here.
Perfect, we'll share.
That'll work.
Sorry. So we have a lot of facility users, a lot of people that use this trail to go to the lake or use the field area, dog walkers, community. I mean, we have people that walk through there, hundreds of people as soon as the gate opens after school. And so I think it'd be really nice to have it look a lot nicer. I'm sure some of you guys use that area as well, whether you're riding bikes or walking, taking your dog there. Probably have kids that come and play and practice in some of the sports that we use. So this is what it looks like right now, and it's kind of uneven, there's a lot of pits in it, bad irrigation problems, as you can see, and we'd really like to upgrade it. Part of what we would do when we upgrade it is make it so that it's usable by a lot of different groups, even up to the older age groups, and they can do all of the sports. We're gonna keep our baseball fields there and softball fields, but also make it for up to 18-year-old kids to play their sports there, have multiple fields, flat surface, 2 big fields that drain naturally how they do now. And it's gonna be barely graded. There's a slight modification to the field, but it'll be safe and everybody can use the field. And it's a huge area. It's one of the biggest areas that I've seen in this area. So it'll be nice to have it up and going and have kids able to play sports and the community use it.
I can't see how many soccer fields, one?
So there's one huge football field. It says it's football, but you can use, it's gonna be 2 fields next to each other. And they're big enough for all of the soccer age groups. We actually had an architect go through this and engineers come out to make sure that we can maximize the space and be able to do multiple sports at one time, or tournaments, scrimmages, and just make it a really big usable area.
Will you guys be using the same Bermuda style that you've been using on the other fields?
I believe we were looking at Bermuda. I don't think we have that nailed down yet, just because sometimes it does go dormant in the winter, but I mean, a lot of people like Bermuda, so we might lean that way.
Okay.
I have a question, because it is free access to Folsom Lake now and everyone knows it. Where's the foot traffic then routed? Because most people cut straight across and lots of foot traffic just, finally just makes a path through the middle of a field. So do you have?
So we could look into that. We're in the designing phases. I know originally people kind of walk along this area right here and some,
but
some
the
do.
bike riders, they just go straight across because it's the fastest.
The
way.
intention is to put a path, a more designated cement path, so that people can follow that more easily, and so they're not as likely to go straight through the field.
What about low fencing?
There is low fencing around there right now, the 4-foot fencing. And so I think that it's pretty good how it is now, but I mean, we could definitely take some consideration if you have better ideas or thoughts to put into it.
By hearing you say it needs to be channelized better, is that?
But you wouldn't disallow people from connecting to the trail through the new improvement.
Oh, no.
There already is a trail, it's just instead of using the trail, they're cutting across the field.
It's just
Right, I'm
directing
just
the
saying, in the new
traffic.
project, they're not gonna restrict that access, is my question. And I do have one other question.
Yeah.
Lights are very controversial in Granite Bay.
Yeah.
So does this project intend to have lights?
Truthfully, we are not able to afford lighting.
Okay,
at this field,
so it would be
they're not-
daytime,
Yeah, it would not be
daytime
proposed to have
which
commercial
I'm
lighting.
sure a lot
outside
of the
this time.
neighbors would be happy about.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So, as a resident of 35 years, just around the corner, and I walk through there at night, because I called you and
Oh, yeah.
let you know what's wrong with the school when the doors left open or whatever. But, there's deer that come on the field at night, and speaking of lights, up against that large building there, it's now floodlamp at night, it's just all bright. So, one thing I noticed, the deer don't keep the grass short and and but the deer where they live is over where the proposed housing is gonna go. And let me tell you what, at 1 o'clock yesterday, there was 4 of them right there on the other side of the barbed wire fence.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Yeah, you showed me the video.
Want to take questions from the board first? Chris?
I actually have 3 questions. One is, have you considered a partnership with Lakeside Little League or GBFC to?
I actually reached out to a lot of the groups to see if I can get someone to come here, and I got a letter. I did get a letter from lacrosse, and they said they would be ecstatic if we could pull this project off, just because they're limited on only using a portion of the field right now for safety reasons. So if we were able to open it up and have everything work, we could have a lot more usage, you know, from all of the teams that participate on the field.
We do have interest from them, and some of them are willing to financially contribute as well.
So who are you representing then? Just, are you?
Eureka Union School District.
EUSD, okay. So Lakeside would be another one. Have you reached out to them to see?
We do. I don't know his name off the top of my head, but we did reach out to them. We sent an email.
Okay.
And we just, I mean, they were all kind of merging together, lacrosse, soccer, and baseball.
Okay, I have his info if you want it after this.
Yeah, he's one of my best friends, so.
Also, the other question was, as it exists now, I know it's thrashed, but there are 3 baseball, softball fields. Looks like there's 2 there. Is there any reason why that bottom right corner wouldn't be another diamond?
Yeah, we were taking that off to maximize the field size, and the other kids kind of use these 2 fields that are here, and they're the larger ones that have the better structure. The other one's kind of a movable backstop, so we wanted to kind of make these guys the priority.
Okay, and then the last question I have is, have you considered turf, or at least on the infields?
I'm not sure if funding would be, you know, possible if we
Sure.
were to do turf. But
Okay,
I mean, you know, this is kind of where we're going right now, just to make it really playable and open it up to everybody.
Any other questions from the board?
I have one other question. So if you do open it up, if they're enhanced, obviously a lot more teams are gonna wanna play. So would you be following, I think the county has like the request system, or how would that work?
So we
then?
have a request system too. It's called ML Schedules, and all of
Okay.
our sports teams from basketball, gym.
They do that.
They all sign up there, they rent it out, and then there's like an actual schedule, so you can see what's open and
Got
pick
it.
it when you need to.
Okay, okay.
This, this photo that you have here shows, it looks like you're conserving water.
Yes, yes, definitely. We're limited to circles on that old irrigation.
So are you keeping the irrigation system the same? And-
No, I would like to change that out completely along with the drainage system, or most of the drainage system, because I want to have more than head-to-head coverage. I'm actually a C-27 contractor too, so I really want to make sure that this field stays green and never ends up like that again.
All right, Vermeer grass will help you.
Oh, yeah.
It will.
I'll take 2 questions from the crowd because we're already over time, but yes, and then.
Hi there. Thanks. So the most successful field by far in Granite Bay that already exists, I would argue, is Ronald L. Price, that's right behind Granite Bay High School. There's a pristine field that is used for sports and for a dog park, and has dog fountains and multiple uses. And the turf itself is absolutely gorgeous. But you go and I mean, I played soccer my whole life. It's like a drain field. So if I could put anything to y'all, is go find out what that grass is.
Bermuda.
and
It's
put
Bermuda.
that in.
The Bermuda.
To comment on having artificial turf, a lot more scientific studies are coming out about
Yeah.
the carcinogen effects of irregularized turfs and injuries and things like that. It's never fun to play on. I believe. So
We are leaning that way with the grass. Yes, sir?
Gary.
So a few years ago, that whole field was reseeded and cordoned off, and it's already a mess, so what are you guys gonna be doing different this time? Because it was just redone.
Yeah, I think the main thing is redoing the irrigation. And that's a huge part of keeping everything alive, updating it. I mean, it's probably 50 years old and there's just been, you know, patches here and there. So to completely redo it and have it work for the future is our plan.
This one,
1991. Oh, okay.
to clarify, this is a non-action item, so are you just looking for feedback?
We are, yeah, taking notes, getting feedback, that's correct. Yeah.
And then if I could just throw in one thing real quick, we're also trying to upgrade the tennis courts there, possibly turn one of them into a pickleball and just make them look really nice and pop for the community and make it usable as well.
When was the last time those were updated?
It's been a long time. We have a very old agreement that goes back more than 20 years, 25 years. That requires a partnership between the county and the school district for major maintenance. So we wanted to use this opportunity to say, let's make this the best. Let's fund it really well. Let's do the best technology, the most durable, pickleball and tennis, most usable. And then we'll probably extinguish that old contract, just because we try to not let those linger on in perpetuity. But we really want to do it right, and now we have the opportunity and the funding to do it.
Any questions? Hold on. Yeah, Mike?
Follow-up question. Maybe I missed it, but did you say you were gonna strike those for pickleball as well as tennis?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
On the pickleball courts, anything from the board?
I think that would be a great idea.
Lights.
And we had somebody.
No,
from the
not
audience
lights, pickleball.
come and talk about his desire to have pickleball there.
Yeah.
We do plan to have our marquee put out and replace the old Cavad one too, and that's kind of a, you know, kind of dress up the whole area and make it all kind of flow together.
Okay, and we'll take two comments from the crowd on the pickleball specifically. You already asked, so I'm gonna go behind you.
It just wants to reflect that we've had a couple of people who have come with interest about the tennis court there and have expressed an additional interest about turning the area just adjacent to that into a dog park. And so that has come up on the notes several times. So
We have reached out to our insurance group and they're unsure if they're able to provide insurance on a school campus for a dog park. They're doing some research and trying to see if any carriers will cover us, but it hasn't been successful thus far. It's not looking likely.
Last comment on the pickleball or tennis courts. Okay.
Just one more thing real quick, the kids at night in the summer, when those things pop up and start floating around, they'll come and kick them off.
We have
And then you'll have-
cameras everywhere.
And we have added lighting, I've added a lot of lighting there, like.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is I can control the schedule, so if I have them come on after night when kids aren't around, that'll help us out too.
Well, they're out there at night in the summer.
Oh.
Okay, well, thank you, guys.
Yep.
Thank you.
Oh, Suzanne, yeah.
Andy, that includes resurfacing those.
The courts?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep, resurface and striping, and I presume any leveling that needs to be done.
We don't have
Everything to rejuvenate the whole thing. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
I have the next item too, I believe. Hopefully I can help you make up some time on this one. It should be fairly quick. So the next item is a county request. If you've seen the flagpoles at Granite Bay Park, Rotary put those in a couple of years ago. You saw that, you can see the big tall American flag. That was a great municipal quality pole. It's holding up just fine. But if you see the military Greenwich flags next to them, one, they're kind of out of scale. It's like toothpicks next to a telephone pole. So we'd like to make them a better scale compared to the American flag. And they just weren't very durable. They were kind of the tail end of the project. They weren't municipal quality. And so Rotary has come back to us and said, if you can buy the better material, the better poles for us, then they'll be happy to do the labor, put them in, make them nicer, make them fit the scale of the American flag better. On this request, it says that we're requesting 50,000. I'd like to make the request actually for 75, just with the wildly fluctuating metal costs and everything. Have enough to make sure we can do the project. Anything that's not spent on this project or the last one you heard goes back into the park fee account. So I'd like to request 75,000 to purchase the poles themselves that Rotary would put into Granite Bay Park. That's it.
Any comments or questions from the board?
Yeah, Andy, is there any height requirement in the community plan that would prohibit the military flag from being a little bit higher?
No, because the control is the American flag that's already there. There was some, we did have to go through a review, if I recall, for the American flag, but now that we've done that, I believe, and considering your military flags will always be somewhat lower, that we're covering for that.
They seem to be out of proportion to the American flag by a lot. And
Yeah.
if they could be brought up a little bit closer, that might make it look better.
That's the intent, yeah.
Any other questions, comments from the board? From the audience? Yep.
As a Granite Bay Rotary member, we'd be very appreciative. The gentleman working on is Mike Baker, and he's gone to great length, and we're putting in a walk of honor to honor all of our fallen heroes in this community. And we are spending a tremendous amount of money on this, and we would be very appreciative if you guys would consider that as an expense that you would put on towards. Thank you.
You're not aware as well that it was Granite Bay Rotary, led by Mike Baker, who put in both of the picnic pavilions in Granite Bay Park and Vice Park.
I think they poured the concrete today.
They did.
I put in old sleeves. Did you really? Mike, yeah.
Nice.
I worked with Mike for 20 years.
Any other comments from the audience or from Zoom? Oh, we have two from Zoom.
Katrina, go ahead and unmute your mic and ask your question or make your comment.
Hi, I'm curious why it's 70,000 for 4 flagpoles. Can we get a breakdown of what those costs are? That just seems really out there.
Our initial cost estimate is 50,000. Just want to make sure that we have enough buffer because of wildly fluctuating material prices lately. And if it doesn't take 75, hopefully it won't, and they're 50, then 25 goes back in the account. Just for that kind of a project and that scale of money, we'd like to have enough to make sure we can do it. We've got it in the account. Make sure we get it. Don't have to come back to anybody, get it done, and then anything left goes back in the account.
I just have one comment. I'm the chairman of the Trails Committee, and I've seen the studies that they've done, and the number one thing requested in this community is trails. I don't want to see this money whittled away on all these other things when that's our first priority. We've been accumulating funds for what, 20 years. We've not really invested in the trails. So, you know, I want you to be using tighter jurisprudence. If you can get more people willing to contribute, to be benefactors to these things, I think that would be a good thing.
Understood. Thank you.
Steve, go ahead and unmute your mic and ask your question or make your comment.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
So you're fighting a losing battle. We're increasing the population in Granite Bay and we're redoing Cavad Field on a regular basis. When I managed the soccer fields for the Granite Bay, well, it used to be Eureka Soccer Club. This was a constant problem. We were giving the school district $18,000 a year when I left, and that was probably 15 or 20 years ago. So with $2 million, $2.5 million, maybe the county should look at Site 26 in their rezone plan and consider requiring that developer to put in a 5-acre park to help alleviate the problem we have. All we're doing is adding people, which is contributing to the decay of those lots. So that's my comment.
One last comment. Any other comments, questions?
Can I just add one comment, to that point, Andy, I know in that trail the survey, up above there with sports fields, it was trails and open space. So I think it is a very valid comment, so just want to make sure we think about those remaining dollars for possible open space acquisition as well.
Great.
Understood.
Well, thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you, Andy.
And for our last non-action item, housing element amendment and rezone revisions. Well, I figure what most of you are here for is Callie is.
Callie's not here.
Okay.
So we're the, and,
Got scared.
Yep.
Andy's, comment. It's gonna be me. So hello, everyone. Chris Bahuli, I'm the Placer County Planning Director. Happy to be with you this evening to talk about the housing rezone program. And what I was intending to do with the update is to, I know that there might be some people here that haven't been participating in the past, that haven't heard all of the presentations. We've been here at least a couple times now talking about the rezone program. So I'll provide a little bit of background on how we got to this point, why we're doing the rezone program, talk about where we're currently at with the program, what the status is, and then where we're going from here. What are the next steps? So to start with a little bit of background, why we're doing the housing rezone program is because back in 2021, this document here is our Placer County housing element. And in 2021, when this housing element was adopted, what we had to do was look at how much land was available for the proposed or for the planned development in unincorporated Placer County. And we had to plan for that growth. And as part of that, the state requires that we look at the growth within various income levels. So we have to provide housing at all income levels within the county. And what the housing element resulted in was that we had enough land zoned appropriately for market rate housing, moderate housing, moderate income housing. But we didn't have enough land zoned appropriately to accommodate the need for very low and low income. And so as a result of that shortfall, when this document was approved back in 2021, it included a program that the county was going to rezone land to meet that shortfall. And the shortfall that we have is land that could accommodate about 1,200 units of housing. So the shortfall that we need to meet is 1,200 units, or land to meet 1,200 units. And so back in 2021, when that was adopted, what the county was looking at doing was using an overlay zone. It's a way that we can apply a zoning designation to properties to allow for the base zoning of the property to remain, but then to be able to do a higher density residential development on that property.
And
And-
sir, can you just clarify, why do we have to do this? And what if we don't, what's the reason, what happens if we don't do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the reason that we have to do it is that the state requires each jurisdiction within California to adopt a eight-year cycle housing element to plan for the development of all of the housing in the jurisdiction. So whether you're a city or county, you have to adopt this. If you don't adopt it, there are some significant penalties, and you've probably read about a number of jurisdictions across the state that have either decided not to adopt a housing element or not comply with the state requirement. There's been a lot of news coverage about Huntington Beach and all of the lawsuits that are going back and forth between the state and Huntington Beach. That is one method that the state has to make you comply, is to force lawsuits and financial penalties. If you also don't comply with what the state requirements are, there's a provision called the builder's remedy. That builder's remedy, and there are a number of jurisdictions, even locally, that are under builder's remedy. There's been recent news coverage about the city of Davis, who are under a builder's remedy provision. That allows for developers to propose multifamily residential that does not need to comply with your local requirements, and could result in a much more dense housing development than is allowed in your with your local regulations. So there are some pretty significant penalties of not complying. I was talking about if you don't comply with housing elements, but that's the same if we were not to comply with the rezone program. So what could happen currently, we have a certified housing element with the state. If we were to not comply, it's very likely that the state would decertify our housing element. That could result in, like I mentioned, lawsuits, financial penalties, could result in the builder's remedy. It also could impact the ability to issue permits. That's a pretty drastic option. But some jurisdictions in California have been subject to a loss of permit authority. And that is something that's happened even locally, here with other jurisdictions, so. But other questions, or did that?
No, sorry, I just wanted to catch everyone up. That's where we were at in the last couple of meetings.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we learned that the overlay zone was not going to be an appropriate method for accomplishing our rezone. That was because of a case, because of a court case early last year out of the city of Clovis. And so that resulted in us moving to a rezone of properties from this overlay zone approach to a rezone to multifamily. And so what we are currently looking at is a rezone to multifamily, 20 to 30 units per acre. So a little bit about how we got to the point that we're at now. The housing element identified potential sites for the rezone. It included 34 candidate sites for rezone. I should mention that I know there's been a lot of talk about site 26. Site 26 was included as a candidate site for rezone in that housing element that was adopted back in 2021. It also identified, like I said, 34 other sites throughout the county that were potential sites. A lot of those sites were in Auburn. Some of them were in Penryn, but throughout the county, there were sites that were identified. With the change in approach, we looked at adding additional properties because we knew that with the overlay zone approach going away, we weren't going to be able to meet the requirement by just looking at the sites that were on the housing element. So we looked back at other sites that might be appropriate for increased density. We also began, as we started the outreach process, we started hearing from brokers and property owners that might be interested in upzoning their property to participate in the rezone program. And so we did have a workshop in front of the board after all of this outreach on November 27th. At that November 27th meeting, we presented a proposal to the board that included what at the time we believed to be property owners that were willing to participate in the rezone program. And we had a list of about 35 properties at that time that amounted to about 3,100 units. So it would have been a pretty significant buffer over what we were required to do, which, as I mentioned earlier, was 1,200 units. At that workshop, and I'm sure many of you either participated or watched the meeting, but what the direction was coming out of that meeting from the Board of Supervisors was that they wanted us to significantly reduce the number of properties that were under consideration. They indicated that they were comfortable with a minimal buffer, so not exceeding significantly that 1,200 unit number. And then they also directed staff to look into county-owned properties as a potential for accommodating some upzoning and to accommodate some of the rezone. So we took that direction. We came back to the board on February 13th. Again, many of you may have participated in that meeting or viewed it. But at that meeting, staff brought forward a proposal, again, all voluntary participation. So no, there was direction from the board that they didn't want to look at forced rezoning property owners, which is an approach, right? The county does have the ability to, the land use authority, to rezone property, even if property owners were not interested in rezoning their property. However, the direction was that we wanted to look at voluntary participation from property owners and not forced rezoning properties. So again, on February 13th, the proposal that went before the board was 22 properties, so significantly reduced, that would account for about 1,400 units. So a pretty minimal buffer, 6% over what's required. Those were The board direction at that time was to shrink that number even more. So coming out of that board hearing, the board direction was to look at 19 properties. That again is about that 1,400 unit threshold. In addition, the board directed staff to submit a housing element amendment. That's what we're required to do in order to make these changes and present them to the state. So there's a 7-day public notification and review process with that housing element amendment. We indicated in the staff report package to the board that we would follow that 7-day public notification process and then submit the amendment to the State Department of Housing and Community Development. In addition to those actions, the board also directed staff to initiate amendments to the Sunset Area Plan. We identified 2 county-owned properties off of Cincinnati Avenue near the Sunset Industrial Area as being potential candidates for rezone. Those properties have some pretty significant development constraints to them. However, they are a potential site for rezoning and could be used eventually for affordable housing. So that was the direction that was provided to staff from the Board of Supervisors back on February 13th. Going to talk a little bit now about what the current status of the program is. So we do have a draft programmatic environmental impact report that has been released. We are in a public comment period now. I know we've already received comments from a number of people here today on that draft programmatic EIR. That comment period runs through March 18th. So there continues to be time to review the draft programmatic EIR. It's on our website. And provide comment on that draft EIR. Again, the closing period for the EIR public comment period is March 18th. We did have a planning commission meeting on February 22nd to receive public comment on that draft EIR. And so that meeting was held. There were about 40 public commenters on the draft EIR. All of the comments that were provided at that meeting, some of which were responded to at the meeting, or have all been assembled and will be responded to as part of the final EIR, which will be ultimately issued for this effort. We also were directed by the board and have complied with posting signs, which I'm sure you've seen the signs, on the properties that are included in the program. So there are 4 properties in the Granite Bay area. Those properties have been signed. In addition to the signs, we've also sent out public notifications, public letters to all property owners within 300 feet of each site.
Guys, quiet. Let him finish.
We sent letters to all property owners within 300 feet.
Did you put the sign in the middle in the center of the property? Because that would take up considerable.
Let him finish his presentation and then we can have comments on it.
And then, as I mentioned, we've also posted the draft housing element amendment on our website for public notification and review. It is there for that 7-day period, which closes tomorrow at the end of the day, close of business tomorrow. So what's next? Following that review period, we will be submitting the draft housing element amendment to HCD. HCD is likely to have comments. They're likely to, have some concerns perhaps about some of the properties or some of the analysis that's provided in our housing element. They are in a 60-day review period, and they will provide comments back to us that then need to be addressed as part of a final housing element amendment that will need to have action taken on it. We are tentatively scheduled for a planning commission hearing to hear the final package, which will include the housing element amendment. It will include the final environmental impact report. It will include a general plan amendment and the rezone of all of those properties, all of the 19 properties. That was tentatively scheduled for April 25th. We are also tentatively scheduled then to take that recommendation forward to the Board of Supervisors on May 7th. Again, all of this in an effort to be compliant with the adopted housing element, which requires the program to be completed by May 15th of 2024. So before I finish my remarks, I just wanted to clear up a couple of misunderstandings perhaps of the program. So I already talked about non-compliance, so thank you for that question, because that was something that I was intending to talk about, was what happens if we don't comply with the program. I should also mention, I know it's come up at some of the board hearings, the ability to get an extension from the state for the program. And it's very limited. The only ability to extend through statute is that if we were to rezone 75% of the shortfall, there is the ability for the board to adopt a resolution to request a 1-year extension. And again, it's just a 1-year extension to then get to that final 25%. So we do have to get to a point of rezoning 75. So it's under a very limited set of circumstances that there can be an extension for this effort. I want to point out, I know it came up during the last time we were here talking about the rezone program, but there is not a requirement that any of the sites that are on our housing element or that would be rezoned to fulfill this need be affordable. There's no deed restriction that will be placed on any of these properties requiring that they be affordable. What we are required to do is to demonstrate that there's enough land zoned appropriately, so at that 20 to 30 unit per acre threshold to fulfill the requirement. Having said that, the county does have an affordable housing ordinance, which does require a certain percentage of housing to be affordable, depending on the size of the property and depending on the size of the unit. So there is a potential that depending on the project, there could be a requirement for a certain percentage to be affordable. But again, no deed restriction on these properties. They're not going to be required to be, we've heard a lot about homeless housing or Section 8 housing or things like that. That is not a requirement, nor will there be a deed restriction on any of the properties requiring that they be affordable. I should mention that there are no current development proposals on any of the sites in Granite Bay. Out of all of the 19 properties that we're looking at, only one property, I guess it's 2 properties, one site, sites in Penryn actually have a development proposal that has been filed with the county. The rest of the sites, there is no current proposal. There's no application that's pending in front of the county for any projects with those sites. And then lastly, I wanted to mention that should these sites be rezoned, what would we expect? And so if the properties are rezoned to the RM30 designation, it's not the last, you would still see a project that would move through a process. So all of the sites or all of the properties subject to the RM30 zoning designation would be required to have a design review performed on them. Design reviews do have a notification requirement. They are required to be noticed to people within a 300-foot radius. So there is a notification process for design review, the design review entitlement. In addition to that, with this programmatic EIR, there is a conformity review process. So as part of that entitlement, a project would have to be submitted, reviewed. Any of the mitigation measures that are included in the programmatic EIR would be applied to these properties. And so, there would be that conformity review process, and should any additional environmental impacts be determined through that process, additional, environmental analysis would be required for each one of those properties. So that concludes, what I was planning on addressing with the presentation, and so I'd like to turn it back over to.
So first, we're gonna take questions from the board and then from the audience, but first I have two questions. Question one, just make sure you can tell us so everyone's on the same page. Where are the 4 properties in Granite Bay that are on the list?
Yeah, so the 4 properties are the property over near Bayside Church, so it's that triangular shaped property there. There's the larger site, the site 26, that is the Auburn Folsom site.
Fuller.
And Fuller, and then there's a site further south that's across the street from there, just north of Eureka, and then there's a site that's on Old Auburn Road. Thank you, sorry.
And then next question, if there's 19 properties being redesignated in Placer County, why are 4 of them in Granite Bay, especially given how Granite Bay is so small compared to the rest of the county?
Yeah, good question. So I've been talking about the shortfall, right? So within the county's within the county's housing element that I mentioned earlier, I mentioned that we have a shortfall of that 1,200 units. Well, the housing element takes into consideration the entire county and takes into consideration land that is already zoned appropriately and that we were able to count in our housing element. Our total lower income obligation, again, I've been talking about the shortfall of 1,200, but our total obligation is 3,400 units. So most of the development that's already included in our housing element is in the specific plan areas. So it's in Placer Vineyards, it's in Placer 1 or Placer Ranch. There's a sizable amount of land in the Auburn area near the county offices at the government center. So there's over 2,000 units that are already identified in the housing element to accomplish this lower income obligation. None of the sites that are in the housing element are in Granite Bay. And so the sites that were candidate sites for rezone, there were a handful of sites in the housing element in Granite Bay, including the Auburn Folsom site. And as we were going through that process of looking at the rezone sites, we were looking at trying to balance the number of units throughout the communities in the county, and making sure that there was some balance as to the 3,400 units. And so you're right that there are 4 sites out of the 19 that are in Granite Bay. And that amounts to a pretty sizable amount when you look at the shortfall units. There's also a fair number of units out in the Dry Creek area in District 1. We've been hearing a lot, if you've been to any of the meetings, you've been hearing a lot from those neighbors that live in the Dry Creek area. We've also heard a lot from folks in the Auburn area that they have a number of sites that are in the Auburn area as well. So there are 4 out of the 19, as you pointed out, but they're also, when you look at the larger 3,400 unit number, they're pretty well distributed. And again, there are no sites that are that were in the housing element currently in Granite Bay.
And then another comment, site 26 is also rather large for a small community, and the county had opportunities to select up to what you said, 3,100 properties or acres you had initially selected for this?
31 sites.
35.
There were
Sorry,
35 sites, and there were over 3,000 and some change.
And then you've whittled it down to 19 or about roughly 1,400. So the county has plenty of opportunities to select other sites besides the ones in Granite Bay.
Yeah, I'd say that going back to a comment that I made earlier, the one of the major major points of direction from the board was to accomplish the rezone through voluntary participation of property owners. As we continue to work on the process, there were a number of property owners that either fell out and didn't want to participate anymore, or were, somewhat waffling in terms of their participation. And, obviously, as I mentioned, we need to get this accomplished by May 15. And so we got to a point where when we came back to the board in February with a shorter list of properties, we were only dealing with voluntary participants. And so the 4 properties, just to make it clear, the 4 properties in Granite Bay, the property owners are voluntary participants in the program and have signed affidavits stating that they want to participate in the program, and have allowed us to post signs on their properties and so forth.
And I'll let the community speak for itself, but I think you'll see in this community, the comments are that we would suggest to the board to pick another site, especially for something as large as Site 26.
You're so kind with your words.
But I will first, any other questions, comments from the board?
You want to start with me?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
First of all, let's talk about how we got here and this whole business of building the rules for building affordable housing. We are here today because for decades, we have not followed that rule of building 10%. Instead, we took paltry sums of money that could build nothing in lieu fees. So now we have this big deficit, 3,400, whatever the unit number, it's a big number. Now, part of the rule is if you're going to build a development of 100 units, you have to build a 10%. If you're building less than 100, guess what? You don't have to build it. Look at the site sizes that you're picking. They're small. And even though it sounds like, oh, there's 10 acres there, you can build 300 or whatever, the actual building envelope is much smaller. And like the Bayside and the one by Cavad, you've got wetlands, you've got trails and all this other stuff. So your building envelope is really, really tiny. Those sites might withstand, or it would be good for maybe 10 per acre, but no, we're doing this. The other thing is, we're supposed to be a planning department. So if we're just asking for volunteers, what kind of planning is that? So what this needs to be done is work through our community plan, not just taking a bunch of volunteers. Now you guys think it's going to be so terrible, the state's going to take over, yada, yada. This is a self-inflicted wound. So now we need to do the right thing. We do need to build affordable housing. I don't want anybody in this room to think that we don't, because we have teachers and nurses and all kinds of people that have to, drive 30 miles to get to work. So I'm very, very disappointed in the way the county has gone about this process.
Chris, I know we've spoke many times, so I'm gonna keep my questions very specific to the housing element.
Okay.
Update, because that's due tomorrow. So can you help the public understand 2 of the major programs that you guys are proposing? The first being the replacement unit program, and I do have a specific question about that. And then the large site development program, and talk a little bit more about that conformity review process and how the public would actually be notified. And then what would trigger an additional environmental analysis, because Site 26 is part of that in the program.
Sure. Good questions. So as part of our housing element, our draft housing element amendment that we have put together, working with the consultant team that's helping us on the general plan update, and is on our website now, has a few new programs that would be added to our housing element. And those programs are added because we're forecasting what HCD might have some concern about and ways to address those concerns. I will say, as I mentioned earlier, HCD may look at those programs and think we haven't done enough, we need to do more, and then we might have to revise some of those programs before we get to the planning commission and get before the board. But in response to your two items, the first is a program related to replacement of replacing displaced people in housing that's already constructed. One of the concerns that we forecasted that HCD may have, and this is related to primarily sites that are on the inventory that are not in Granite Bay, sites that are on the rezone program that are not in Granite Bay. There is a site in the Alpine Meadows area. There's a site in the Alpine Meadows area that actually has some workforce housing currently on the site. As well as there are a couple of other sites, including the site on Auburn Folsom, where there is a small, I think it's a 3-unit development on it. But one of the things that we forecasted that HCD may have a concern about is wanting to ensure that people that currently live in housing on these properties aren't displaced. And so the program that's been included includes protections and programs for the county to ensure that people that might be displaced have the ability to either return to the site, or we're providing assistance to them so that they're not out of.
So it's existing housing, not that, because the language is confusing, and
Okay.
so one of the questions that I have is that it almost reads or could be interpreted as even specific plans that are zoned to build affordable housing, which oftentimes they phase that later, which is why we have the burden. And by the way, it's 36% District 4 has of the burden of the unmet need, which is significant. But the question is, so that doesn't specify that if a specific plan has a requirement to build affordable housing and they phase it later, that can be then transferred to these other rezone sites?
No.
It's not that?
No, not at all.
Okay.
And so we'll take another look at that to make sure that
Okay.
that is clear, and that when HCD reviews it is clear, but it's intended to be addressing sites where there are sites that would be rezoned that have housing already on them.
Okay, and then for the 52, HE 52 large site development, maybe just a couple specific questions and then you can address them, is because site 26 is on there, right now the requirement is you're supposed to be looking at properties less than 10 acres. And so I still don't have a reasonable answer yet, but I know that then you said at one point that HCD can't allow for that, but the county has to demonstrate they can do it. So where's the evidence still?
Yeah, I
that
think
the county has
I think that's
demonstrated?
exactly right. I think the first thing to note is that, HCD's guidance is to not include sites above 10 acres. However, they did approve site 26 to be on our candidate rezone list. So they have reviewed that site already as part of our housing element amendment, and agreed that the site could be placed on the housing element. Or in the housing element, I should say. We, as part of the programs that we were drafting for the housing element amendment, there was another site as well. I think it's a site on Canal in the Auburn area that is also, when you look at it as an aggregate, I believe it's like 12 acres or so. So it's a bit larger, but it also has some development constraints to it as well. And so what the housing element amendment includes is a program to, prioritize those projects through a subdivision of land. So maybe a minor lot division might be something that's required to put some of the constrained area under a separate parcel and only look at the parcel that might have the housing development on it. So there's a program that speaks to streamlining or prioritizing those types of applications that might come in. So again, that's what we're proposing to HCD. They may have some concerns about it, and we'll see when we get comments back from them.
And I mean, I have a lot of concerns about the conformity review process, but specifically that process, just so everyone is aware, is through the design review committee. That's the body in the county that would review accelerated streamlined projects.
The conformity review would be handled by our environmental coordination services division. So we do have a county environmental coordinator. They would review a project that came in, a design review project, if that's the only entitlement that's being requested. They would look at it for conformance with the programmatic EIR. And, for those of you that have looked at the programmatic EIR, you would see, and I know Amber, you have, but there are a number of mitigation measures, a number of items that would be required at submittal, including a biological resources assessment, including a number of reports and studies that would be required and would be evaluated by our county's environmental coordinator for conformance. If it wasn't, if there was additional analysis that was required, whether that be traffic impacts or something along those lines, those would need to be handled through a subsequent environmental document.
That's misleading.
Well, hold
If
on.
I could
Hey,
finish,
hey,
yeah.
it's out of order.
Yeah.
You can have a chance for your own questions.
So, and I'll just wrap it up to sort of tie two things together. There's a reason I'm asking the questions. So because of this program, that you're proposing in the housing element enables streamlining, which is fast tracking development on sites 26 and the Canal Street site. And it provides technical service funding. So basically, the taxpayers are funding the fast tracking of a developer initiated project. And going back to what you said before, Chris, there's actually no requirement to build affordable housing through this entire rezone program. So in other words, someone might surmise that a developer could take advantage of this, build high density senior apartments that basically affect the community plan and the surrounding plan, and they have it by right once this goes through. And so then that would just kick the can further down the road from a county perspective on the affordable housing problem.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to tie those couple things together before the public response. That's all I had.
Sandy?
It kind of ties in with Amber's. What is the time frame when you say streamlining? Because I've looked at some of those conformance, and if the county wanted to, they could take a long time going through all the different review process. And so there must be a time frame or a cutoff time. Once you prove this, how much time do they have to get it completed?
Yeah, that's also a good question. You know, it does depend on the type of project that comes in and what the entitlements that are requested and whether it's subject to any state streamlining. I know that we talked about the streamlining provisions that we've proposed for the sites that are in the rezone program, but the state has also significantly streamlined housing development. And so, you know, just with the question that you're asking, if there is an application that came in that was just subject to a design review and did meet all of the conformity requirements, once they have a complete application, once they've submitted all of the requirements that are due under the conformity review process, it would be a matter of, you know, perhaps a few months after that to move it forward. But that's likely not the case. I mean, that's usually things do take a much longer time.
So if they get it approved in a few months, then how much time do they have to get it built? Could they take years to build it?
No, we have a 3-year requirement in our entitlements are allowed for a 3-year period, and if they were to request extensions, they could.
But that's for a completed project, not for, what if they don't complete it? I mean.
No, that's for approved projects. They have 3 years to pull building permits to actually construct the project.
And my other question was, lot 26, parcel 26 was approved in the 2021 housing element. What was it approved as? What kind of density?
So that's actually a great question. So it was approved as it was included in the housing element as a candidate rezone site for that housing overlay. The housing overlay would have, so if we headed down that path, the housing overlay still would have required a 20 to 30 unit per acre amount. However, because the overlay zone approach would have also allowed the site or allowed property owners to develop their site as something other or as consistent with the base zoning. There was some discounting that happened in the housing element, and I know that this has come up. I think there's been some questions from the board and from others about that there were only, I believe, 88 units might have been attributed or so to the site 26 in the housing element. That's just the number of units that we would have been able to count under that overlay zone because there was some discounting that was involved. But it still would have been able to be built at a 20 to 30 unit per acre range.
Chris?
I look at those two sites, the one on Fuller and the one across the street, if they both develop out, it's like 500 units. It's a lot.
You mean at the maximum
And that's
amount?
really a congested area, really bad. And you're talking about these small lots, you're gonna have to go up 3 or 4 stories. Yeah,
Exactly.
That's right.
Well, there's a new height ordinance in Placer County, so.
Yeah, 55 feet.
Chris, thanks for being here. Just really, mine should be quick. Amber, you make a great point that this whole thing is a high likelihood the entire intent will be undermined. But I just want some clarification on 2 things. One, who determined the candidate sites, those 19 specifically?
So are you talking about the housing element sites or back to the 9 or the 19
19
we're at today?
The 19 we're at today. Who made that determination, those 19 sites?
So the staff.
I
Sorry, I'm gonna give you a little bit of.
I understand the
I know
state
you're asking
requirement,
for
all
a-
that stuff,
I know you're
yeah.
gonna, I know you're asking for a quick answer on it, but I'll give you a little bit longer answer. So originally, the 34 sites that were identified in the housing element, 9 of them were in the housing element from 2021. And the way that those sites were identified was back in 2019. The county put together a housing work program, identified 100 sites throughout the county as being potential sites for
Housing
That
what
was
program?
state.
What housing what program?
A housing work program.
And it made up of who?
County staff,
Okay.
the county housing staff, that went to the board back in 2019 and was validated by the board back in 2019. That then led into our 2021 housing element, 34 sites identified as candidate sites. 9 of the 19 were identified there. We did more outreach. We went back to that list of 100 sites. That's why I bring it up. We went back to that list of 100 sites. We did more outreach to property owners. A number of the 19 sites, in addition to the 9, were sites that were originally identified back in 2019. But there were property owners through their brokers or that heard about what we were doing with the rezone program that did outreach directly to us. And I believe 5 out of the 19 were property owners that reached out directly through their brokers that learned of the rezone program back in early 2023 when we were working on it. So I know that's a little bit longer of an answer, but I wanted to be clear. And then ultimately the 19 properties, as I mentioned, we've had a couple of workshops at the board. And so the list of 19 that we have today is a result of board direction on the properties that are on the list for consideration now.
Okay, lastly, unfortunately, all 4 property owners are voluntary participants, but who has the authority to enforce the rezone of a site?
The county does.
The county, who in the county?
The board of supervisors, through the county's land use authority. So the board has the ability to rezone, properties, either voluntary or involuntary.
So if a property owner decides they're not gonna participate in this, you're saying the board of supervisors has the authority to
still rezone their property.
to just so that goes through the board of supervisors to say we're rezoning, okay.
Yep, absolutely.
But then, okay.
Virgil?
That's fine.
Michael?
Okay, so the board has asked all their questions. We're gonna move to the public. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna, just so we have a little order, I will call on groups, and the groups are gonna be first row, second row, third row, et cetera. So remember, I'm gonna go with the people.
Hold on. Who's gonna go first?
Why she's been up there the entire time.
The people that
got a kid.
the first group. I'm walking you all right, so. And I'm gonna ask everyone on Zoom, if you're planning to make a comment, please raise your hand at this time. We're gonna talk to people in the room first, and then we'll go to them. So, go. Oh, It's like supper time. Nobody gets seconds till everyone's had first, all right? 3-minute limit, without a timer, they'll go off. Okay, so,
Leave it with me.
Go
All
ahead.
right.
Next.
I'm Jacqueline Freeman. I'd like to submit this for your guys' review. It is a document that helps you understand, clarify, and find a solution here. The legal issues that the board and MAC are facing and how we can come up with a simple solution for Site 26. It is simply this: remove it from the rezone program. Take it out of the amendment entirely. It is a large site development. It does not qualify under the HCD's desired size parameters. It has been quantified as having a usable acreage with unfounded evidence. It has a streamlined program attached to it, snuck in the amendment, that does not provide for a conformity review in an environmental sense. It does not require a site-specific EIR later on down the road. It will simply require that the builder point back to the programmatic EIR that has just been submitted. We can understand that this site is highly unique. It is different than the character of the rest of the properties in this rezone program. The rezone program is intended to affect the HCD's goal of having quickly rezoned housing for affordability that is of the nature of infill projects. This is for communities to be able to pop up in an empty space, the right housing at the right time, and have an easy answer. This is not for large site development that would have unique characteristics that would require particularized EIR review. The programmatic EIR does not address the specific things like the federal endangered species that may very well be on Site 26. The Appendix G of your guys' county review identifies California steelhead as federally endangered species and Chinook tall salmon runs at the stream that is on Site 26. We have testimony to the vernal pools that has been submitted in public record. There are significant departures of the character of this site from the rest of the rezone program. All you have to do is ask staff, take out Site 26, and there's only 2 large site developments. You have a buffer. You have a unit buffer. You can take out the 2 large site developments, remove the streamlined EIR process that's snuck in on 151B, and have an actual conservative approach that would require an individualized environmental statement and a developer to come forward for the 2 large sites that are identified. Those sites were identified in 2002 through 2005 from grants that were issued to identify affordable housing sites. So we can't even get a straight answer here. The solution is remove it from the rezone program entirely, and you can move forward. You can meet your deadline.
thank you. We need to hire her. Is there anyone else in the back row? Yours?
Am I allowed to defer my time to my wife?
Yes, you.
Does anyone have any questions from the board?
Could you speak to the interconnected,
Oh, okay.
to Folsom?
So for instance, the programmatic EIR Appendix G evaluates the site-specific biological resources, right? And one of the issues that it does is it takes this broad spectrum view and identifies particular species that are of concern or that are endangered and require environmental attention. For instance, the golden eagle, this Site 26 is directly, physically, and biologically adjacent to the Folsom Lake Basin. Yeah, it is completely dismissed as having no presence data for the golden eagle, which we know is a known species of the Folsom Lake Basin. It is a federally endangered species. We can say with certainty that there are mature trees that are available for breeding sites on Site 26, yet the EIR dismisses this habitat as having no presence data, and the reason stated the areas, the sites are highly fragmented and do not support the large site areas required to sustain the species. This is a prime example of how this Site 26 does not apply the same way to the rest of the rezone program. Site 26 is large, adjacent to Folsom Lake Basin, certainly part of that habitat, but it's dismissed in this programmatic EIR that has the character in mind of infill projects. This is for little lots that are next to subdivisions that do not connect on a biological basis to important areas of need. All you have to do is understand that the Board of Supervisors is the one who certifies whether or not you're compliant with environmental regulations here. You will be sued by the Fish and Game, not the HCD. The HCD simply authorizes that you have a completeness checklist to that you have completed your housing allocation requirement, not that you have actually complied with environmental law. You can be liable for the federal take permits that are not issued and the salmonoids that are injured and the environmental impact that a developer goes through without the adequate review. Thank you.
There you go. Back row question, down there. So I have an office right across the street from the property we're talking about, the cabin on the Falls Park. I go there early in the morning and I come in late at night oftentimes. There are vagrants that sleep in the back of the property. I've called the police.
I've been looking for these, thank you.
These vagrants come up from southern, Sacramento County, going north to get them to go out to Auburn, where they can get them and they hang out there. I run into them in the worst conditions, okay, not to mention the vape shop across. What I don't understand is there should be some criteria for children. A school that's right next to this property. And I have to say that I've seen this happen a lot. I moved from Davis to Woodland. Davis made Woodland the dumping pit for everybody that was low income housing. They made that a rule. I don't feel sorry for them for what they're having to go through now, but I feel sorry for us in the case of Cavad. I think Cavad is the place where we got a park. You have trails, you have lots of people coming and going, and it leads to crime easily. We've had all kinds of incidents up in our area on the Fuller and Bronson. I see some of you here that are my neighbors, and I think we've all agreed. It's not like we don't care about low income housing, and it's not just nurses, it's not just, people that are workers. We're really talking about people that are unemployed and have housing there. And there's a lot of time spent around the property and you got young kids. I mean, when we drive through, when school gets out, you can't get through there with so many young kids. It's an easy place for somebody to, really run into trouble from young kids. So I don't think in the case of Cavad, that, and some of my personal interests as far as property values and things in the way that some people may call it, I'm really concerned about crime. And that I've lived. So there's places that I've lived where crime is where you have low income housing, and where we lived in Woodland, it was 2 blocks away from us, and it was always good. So I have to say that's the number one concern. I just want to remind everyone to please state your name for the record. I'm John Martins. I live on Ralph Bronson Drive. I have a couple questions from the gentleman from your planning. So with the unit yield being 246, what kind of height variances for zoning would you anticipate to get that kind of density of population onto those buildings?
Yeah, I'm trying to recall, I don't have it, I didn't bring it with me, we do have development standards in the RM30 district. They are attached on our site. I think it might be 35 or it could be 45. I can't remember. 45. Okay, thank you.
They're shooting for 55. Yes.
Okay.
So we're looking at that variance, and then we're also looking at a parking variance to support all those parking spaces for the units, correct? Yeah, the idea was what size of parking area you're looking at?
No, it'd be hard to say. Again, we don't have any development proposals other than the one that's in Penryn that we're working through. I'd say for that project, they are not looking at any variance for parking for that project. So it would really depend on whether or not the project could meet the parking requirements or not.
Okay. And I know it's anathema to talk in terms of government and tax relief, but could not the county provide tax incentives to people who may not voluntarily want to participate in the program now? Could those incentives be put out there to incentivize people in other lots and other properties to participate in the program?
Yeah, I think there are likely a number of creative approaches to looking for additional sites and sites in other areas for either rezone or to encourage production of housing on the properties, even if they're not part of the actual inventory themselves.
Okay, so
Because I should say, we do get, if there are sites that are developed that are not on our inventory and they're developed as affordable housing, we are able to count those in meeting our production requirements. One of the things that I didn't touch on is the way that the way that the housing element works and the inventory works is that if we don't have a buffer, if we have a minimal buffer and a site is developed as something other than affordable housing, then it's the county's onus to find other sites to make up that shortfall. If we do get production on sites that are not on the inventory, it helps in establishing whether we're experiencing a net loss of units.
okay, and I appreciate your comments. The last question. So in zoning, like private developers, this would be a package where you went through zoning, variances, and I think anybody in development, the hardest one to win for developer. By bifurcating this process, which that is no longer an ability to challenge zoning, correct?
We do rezone properties occasionally without projects. That is a possibility where there might not be a project, but just rezoning a site. But to your point, yes, we're rezoning sites. There will be development that comes in later. If it's consistent with the zoning that's been established, it is a much more straightforward process depending on what the project is. Thanks. Yep.
Hi, my name is Sarah Lincoln. I'm the city corner of site 26, so I'm really impacted. I had a couple of questions, but one of them was really related to what Chris had spoken about, which is planning. It's more of a statement because I got a letter back. I wrote Callie that she's the senior planner. It's going to be, she sent you, you're very brave. So one of my questions was, obviously we all have a lot of concerns about traffic and safety, and I brought this all up before, but I asked, will additional services be added, like hospitals, fire services, police and sheriff, schools, grocery stores, gas stations, post office, amenities? It's not here. So her answer was, she wrote me back. If those agencies, companies, etc., need additional services, they have their own obligations for ensuring adequate services. For example, if a hospital needs more staff based on an increase in the population, it is their responsibility to staff their facility. And I'm kind of like that example. I'm like, but there's no real estate in the hospital. You need a room to visit your patient. So you can have 20 more doctors at Kaiser or 20 more nurses, but where are they going to see the patients? Where are they going to put the beds? So we want to add this population to our small community, and we don't have this shops or amenities. So I feel like what Chris said was with planning, you plan first. It doesn't feel like from all these responses I got that the infrastructure has been thought out and planned out. Besides,
It's never happened in the county.
have that happen. Maybe it's gonna come, but I don't see it. My question, so that was kind of more of a comment. I was really pleading for planning. So, but I was confused about who, so you said there would be lawsuits, but we're not incorporated. So is that they would sue if we don't do this, they'll sue the county?
That's one option.
Oh, the lawsuit. Okay, that was one of the options to sue the county.
That would be one option that the state would have, and I think, everyone's probably read that the state has increased authority. The AG's office, the Attorney General's office has been much more vigilant. There were recent lawsuits on affordable housing projects in the city of Elk Grove, local example. But the state has become much more activist, if you will, related to housing.
So I was just curious if it would fall on, local residents or whatever, so, but yeah, anyway, I had another question, but I can't remember it, so.
Thank you. Okay, any more from the perimeter, Becker, last chance, last call? Yes, ma'am.
A really quick one, Sherry, I'm just curious that obviously this seller or owner of the property has wanted to do something with this property for a really long time. Why has he not been able to? But what I'm saying is, what held up, what has he applied for and been denied by the county in the past? Why has he not been able to do anything for all this period of time, and he's highly motivated to do something with this property? Has he been denied anything from the county for any particular reason that we should know about now?
I just heard a lot of offers.
Not to my understanding. I know that there's been proposals or discussions about the site. I should also note that, and I think most people probably know that the site is zoned commercial. So it's not zoned farm, it's not zoned residential agriculture. It is unique in that respect. Out of the 19 sites, that site, as well as a couple of the sites in Auburn and the site in Penryn, are actually zoned commercial. So there could be commercial development on those properties. Many of the other. So there's a design review that's required as well that would be attached to the eventual entitlements that would be applied for.
We could put 10 units on it.
I've lived here for quite a while, and I would like to confirm that we don't have to. I brought this up before. If anybody's trying to go to school, drop their kids off at school, you're backed up for half an hour. There is no way that we can change our infrastructure. There is no way. It's different. We've got one lane each way to go to all our schools. There is no more possibility to expand that infrastructure. I don't care what they say, we can't do it. We don't have enough room. We've got kids now parking for Granite Bay High School down Usual Parkway so far. It's everywhere. I'm seeing accidents. I just saw an accident with kids the other day. Somebody was hit crossing this, with their cars. There is no, I even asked for somebody to stand out there and handle traffic. And they told me we couldn't do that. We have the highway patrol to do that. That's what I asked. I called the school district. They said it's up to the highway patrol to go in the streets. So kids are coming and going. My mom got hit. They're in her car because there is no traffic mitigation there, and it's jammed. And in the classrooms, there's no more room. So you bring all of these people, their cars, their kids. We don't have the infrastructure, and I don't see any way to have it.
100%.
We really don't.
Great point. Thank you. Now, this is an appropriate time for me to remind everyone to please silence yourselves. There was another comment. Yes, sir.
Following on her comments, my son get hit by car, wiping out. That was 8 years ago. And, the traffic is so bad. Now we're adding these small people, our children should be tired and their safety should be tired.
Your name for the record, sir?
Brad Hutchins.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I'm sitting here. My name is Evelyn Bird, and I just want to reiterate what this gentleman said. There's a school there. Where is the common sense to put any kind of housing on that property? Where's the common sense? It's just plain simple common sense. Holding over our heads that the state can come back and sue us. Shame on you. This is just bottom line common sense. So a lot of hooey here talk and a lot of BS trying to pass it off. And again, it's common sense. Why would you put any housing, let alone low income housing, right next to a school, right next to family neighborhoods, surrounded? Because somebody told the board of supervisors we're on the list. I know it's been many years, but this gentleman has tried to do different things, and it got slammed down many years ago. So he's been busy trying because there he sits.
I see deer, I see owls, I see coyote. I'm sure there's rattlesnakes, all of those things belong here. So I just don't, again, it's just common sense. So.
Being shared, people in the front.
And like I said, it just doesn't make sense, it's out of proportion, and it's right next to Cavad, which is a one lane going in there. And can you imagine everyone going to school and then people leaving for work? I just don't see, it's a one lane road, so what's gonna happen, people are gonna cut through that little area, you know, where the commercial is. It was zoned commercial, it should be stay commercial. You know, and this property, 26, should have never been on the list. I went to the meeting and up on, in Auburn, up on Bell Road, there was another property that was on that list. Guess what? That one was taken off. And this property, that right here, 26, it's 18.1 acres. That's what the county has it at. With the setback, it's a 12.3. That's still over the 10-acre, your rule that you guys are breaking, and you're fast tracking it through the environmental impact report, which is nonsense because you guys have a deadline. So my question is, what are the chances of this particular property can be taken off the list? And also with the environmental impact report, what are the variables, like, you know, we mentioned salmon and other things, what would actually disqualify this property from getting on that?
So I'll reiterate what I mentioned earlier, which is the next steps that are coming up. So next steps, as I said, tentatively, we're looking at going to the final package, which would include final action on the sites. Would be going to the planning commission on April 25th. Again, tentative dates, May 7th to the board of supervisors, who will take final action on what properties are in, what properties are off.
And how do we have a say?
Those are public hearing, those are
We need to
public
talk
hearing,
to our supervisor.
those are public
District
hearings.
4, Suzanne Jones.
We'll cover all, we'll cover that information about how to submit
Board of
comments.
Supervisors, the planning commission recommends to the board of
We'll
supervisors.
cover
That
it. We'll
board
cover
of
this.
supervisors act on the planning commission's recommendation to accept the draft EIR and the housing element rezone program. They can start and stop the buck.
So just to clarify, it won't be a draft EIR at that point, it will be the final EIR that will be put in order.
All right, we're gonna jump up here to the first row and I'm gonna start, everybody in the first row who has a comment or question, raise their hand. Yes. Okay, we're gonna start on that and we'll break.
There's a petition online already signed by 1,100 people against this. How does that input get into this process?
Again, I think through the planning commission hearing and through the board of supervisors hearing, I think that's where
So the buck stops with the board of supervisors.
Yeah, I'd say at this point, you know, again, there's an adopted housing element that says that we will comply with this program by May 15th, 2024. Staff has been putting together a package that is in compliance with that approved package, approved back in 2021. That's what the staff is bringing forward. Absolutely, when we go to the planning commission and the board, there could be a number of things that change, either sites removed, a determination to request an extension as under the parameters that I mentioned earlier, or a decision not to move forward with it at all. So again, our job as staff is to put together a package in compliance with board adopted policies and programs.
So to the group, if you haven't signed that petition, go to change.org and search for Cavad.
Hey, wait a minute, they had they needed 1,000 people, we got the 1,000
Yeah,
people,
well,
and then they increased it to 1,500, how unethical is that?
But that's not.
Okay, we're gonna keep the, let's, you can talk about that amongst yourselves after or when you get your turn to comment. So Brady already done that.
Yeah.
Next, your sir, did you have, okay, yes, sir, you've been here all through the first. So.
My name is Bob Dixon. I built on Auburn Folsom Road in 8360 Auburn Folsom Road in 1999. 5 people that I know have died on that road in 20 years. The young lady from Granite Bay, the 15-year-old girl that got hit, died in my 14-year-old son's arms. You put 1,000 kids on Auburn Folsom Road in those apartments. Where are they gonna play? Huh? They're gonna be up and down Auburn Folsom. They're gonna be riding their bikes to Horseshoe Ball. Kids are gonna die. Children will die if they build that project. And if you can say anything about stopping it, you need to stand up and stop it. It's a highway with lights. It's not Auburn Folsom Road, it's Auburn Folsom Highway. 50, 60, 70 miles an hour.
Yes.
Kids will die, whether they're from Cavad, or whether they're from the complex, or whether they're from Boardwalk or Park Place. People will die. People will die during the construction of that place. I guarantee you, mark my words. If they go forward with that project, the Board of Supervisors, the Planning Commission, and everybody will have blood on their hands. And I guarantee you, kids will die. Thank you.
My friend Robert Dixon is always before that.
But I would like, sorry, I didn't mean to hurry, but please address your comments to the board or to the county staff.
My name is Donna Hogue. I live right off of Fuller in Granite Bay Village. Mr. Bahuli, you addressed why Granite Bay is kind of being stuck with a higher percentage of compliance. You did a nice job explaining that, but I was waiting for you to reference page F43 of the draft EIR, and I'm just going to read directly 2 sentences off of their draft. 2 of the census tracts where rezone capacity was identified were considered racially concentrated areas of affluence. By identifying sites in this area to rezone for higher density residential uses, the county can facilitate the development of housing, affordable, lower income households in this area and mitigate the current concentration of affluence. Seriously, you're gonna wreck our property values, wreck our way of life so that we can lower our standards.
And risk our safety.
Give me a break. This is sickening that you'd even write this. I think it's very,
That's
it's
disturbing.
it's very ugly to write something like this.
Who wrote that?
This is in the EIR, page F43. Just found it today.
What was it?
It's prepared by a consultant in
Okay.
consultation with staff.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, who is this lady?
Guys, guys,
Sure. Hi, I'm Brian Corrigan. I'm across the street from Donna. A lot of the bigger questions have been covered. In terms of allowing homeowner or landowners to participate in the program, do I understand that they will have some role in making environmental affirmations about the condition of the property and all that going forward?
I think ultimately there will be an applicant, whether that's the current property owner or a subsequent property owner. It's likely that the applicant, whoever that may be, would be the one that would be submitting a proposal for consideration and preparing the checklist in for the conformance review.
And is there any limitation on the current owner's participation based on prior environmental violations on the properties in question?
No.
Okay. And if you have a question, please go ahead.
All right, thank you. My name is Ken Crater, and I have been heavily involved in the development of affordable housing, 4%, 9% tax credit projects, Section 8 housing. And given the fact that the per capita income in this area is so high, family income over $100,000, there's no access to transit, there's minimal employment opportunities. I don't see a whole lot of affordable housing projects popping up here anytime soon. But I'm also very familiar with the Section 26 because my group made an offer on it and the seller's not motivated. He wants his price and his terms. But with the layouts that I did, I'm very familiar, and with all the blue oaks, with all the pockets of wetlands on the property, it's an extremely challenging property to develop. And just using the current zoning, I came up with 180 units and 20 accessible dwelling units. And with no access onto Auburn Folsom, limited access onto Cavad because there's not much spacing between Auburn Folsom and the existing driveway into the middle school. I can't see putting any more density on this. And if anybody is doing an EIR and telling you can, I disagree with them. They're wrong. You can't develop more density on this property. I do believe housing is the highest and best use because commercial would generate way more traffic than that amount of residential. But my point is, maybe there's other options out there, and I've only lived here for a year, so I don't know the politics. So excuse me if I'm speaking out of turn here, but there's a lot, thousands, I would think, of parcels in Placer County that are, say, over a half an acre. What about working with the community to come up with an ordinance for accessory dwelling units and allow that to be a means to help achieve the state's requirements for density? Because what I was gonna do on section 26 is buy 20 boxable units from manufactured Las Vegas. They're $50,000 a piece. They're very economical. You set them on a foundation and hook them up to utilities. If you have the ability to do accessory dwelling units, and I believe within Placer County, if your unit's small enough, you also avoid paying a lot of the very expensive development fees, which I think range upwards of like $70,000 on a single family unit, which kills the idea of affordability right there. But it would seem to me there's a win-win here with accessory dwelling units to work with the community and come up with a plan, figure out, I mean, I'm totally against ADUs if they're 2 stories, if they don't have the proper setbacks, if they eliminate privacy. But there's a lot of things I think you could do to satisfy a huge number of zoning that the state's requiring with ADUs.
If I could respond to that real quick, yeah, just because it is included in our housing element, so. You know, staff, when we were preparing our 2021 housing element, maxed out the amount of ADU credit that we were able to get from HCD. Our housing element relies on 300 units of production of ADUs at that lower income level and an additional 300 units of ADUs at the moderate income level. The good news is that we're on track to meet some of those requirements. We are producing about 80 or so units of ADUs per year. However, HCD did require that we include a program in our housing element that tracks and monitors ADUs to ensure that they are indeed providing affordable housing. And the results of those surveys that we've been doing are that about 2/3 of them might be able to be counted. 1/3 of them aren't being rented out at all. 1/3 of them are, you know, either an extra bedroom that people have at their homes. They allow people to sleep, you know, family members to sleep there when they come over. But, you know, there's some question as to whether or not we will continue to be able to count as many ADUs as we have currently. But ADUs are certainly a option for increasing production of units. Whether or not we can count them at the lower income level might be a question, but there's certainly a strategy that we're using at the county to increase production.
Anyone in the second row, raise your hand if you have a comment or question. We're gonna start on that.
Hi, my name is Holly Tomas. I've been at a couple of the meetings, and the last one. I'm gonna try to, I sent this to them with all the government codes from the RHNA. I interpreted it said that lot number 26, I saw you, because you're at the planning commission, so I'm not gonna go over that, because we've all iterated that, so I read the RHNA and then I interpreted the codes and sent them over to you. Also the code where I don't believe that the government, that we were properly notified, that's also on this document. I'm actually have her name on it, forgive me. But what I'm gonna speak on are 2 things. I'm retired law enforcement. I worked at PD for almost 20 years. I worked at Greenhaven. They built a beautiful, very affluent area and put low income housing. And then they had all this nice in the back what do they have over at Tree Lake? The waterways. And then they did low income. Even now, 30 years later, they still cannot get rid of the crime. They just pop right over, and predominantly the senior citizens, which I also documented in there from your Placer County, where they're going at 547%, the general population. So that is something we need to take into consideration. Crime is a real issue. And the biggest issue that you have is that we're next to a school that has a field, that there is no lighting, and where are they gonna pop over to? Then you've got the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which is our nice trails, which I've been on for the last 30 years, because I've run, and really well done. And they're just gonna pop right down into those homes, and what do you think they're gonna do? And if we do very low income housing, which is a part of your appendix, it's a $38,050, which is approximately, what is that, $13.55 below minimum wage? I'm sorry, let's do the numbers. It's not very hard to do. So from not only the interpretation of the services, and in the EIR report, it says that for any additional police services, which is 154 officers you guys want to hire, they're going to raise taxes. In the RHNA report, it says for the schools, the state has no money, and it's dependent upon Placer County and our unincorporated areas to provide that. So, and then it goes through that. The bottom line is, we do not have the services. I don't think anybody here denies that we don't need affordable housing. I absolutely see it. I work with Volunteer to Feed Hungry. We see it out there. But we have to find a viable place, or we are going to set these people up for failure. They have no transportation. They have no way to get a job, a decent job. So that's my point.
I have to stand up. My name is Casey Eaton. This is my husband, Thomas Eaton. We live up on Lake Shore. We are fortunate to have the trail right behind our house. My thoughts just. Yeah. Going back to during COVID, when everybody was in their homes, we had an extreme amount of traffic going down to the lake. A lot of people cut through Cavad, went down, the trash cans overflowing with trash, just shit everywhere. And we had to go down, us neighbors, us home residents.
We picked up
We had
garbage
to
every
pick
weekend.
everything up.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, okay, so we have an 11-year-old son. And we're talking about, building this beautiful field, baseball fields and all of that, and he'll be in Cavad next year. And then you're talking about putting this 1,400 units. We'll just say 2 adults per unit, which is 2,800 cars on an already high, traffic thoroughfare from Folsom to Roseville. And then you're expecting also all of these people to not cut right through Cavad and go and just fill up the whole entire lake. They don't pick up their stuff. They do not pick up their stuff. It'll become a ground for a whole bunch of mischief projects. And I take personal offense to that because our son's 11 and he's going to Cavad next year.
Thank you. Next question in line, row 2.
Thank you, Ron Severson. I live right behind Cavad Junior High, so adjacent to the property. My biggest concern has been mentioned a couple times, and that's the draft EIR was totally insufficient. It might be sufficient for some properties, because what they did is they took aerial photographs, used Google Earth, they did a drive-by of the property, but no one ever walked the property. And I appreciate this gentleman's comment, because if you actually walked on the property, I would challenge you to identify 12.5 acres. That's almost 71% of that property. And it's a vernal wetlands area. There are ponds. The deer that we talked about earlier when we talked about the fields, they live on the top third. I took pictures of the other day walking the property. I would really appreciate if somebody from the county would actually walk the property to determine if it's even feasible. As that gentleman pointed out, it probably is. And so that if you're going to move this thing forward, we would really insist that a full EIR be done. To determine what the impact is going to be on the deer, the wildlife, the fish, the whole ecosystem. The 2 questions. One, I've done a little bit of research. It looks like the county, a developer can pay in lieu fee for instead of building 10%. Low income housing. And it looks like there's 194 projects that have done that. They've generated $2.4 million. And none of that money's been spent. And there doesn't seem to be an apparent plan for that. So that's the first question is, what is going on with that process? And is that going to continue? Because if we continue to allow builders to avoid building low income housing, we're going to be back here at the end of this housing cycle because nothing's going to get any different. The other question I have is about the Cincinnati project, because you mentioned that briefly. I went out there, it's flat, open grassland. And so I'm really, the question I have is what are the developmental issues that would prohibit the county from using that to meet some of the housing needs?
I'll start with that one first. So that site has some pretty significant constraints. It actually has quite a bit of ponding in the area. It was used as, I believe it was a waste disposal facility at one point. And so it actually would require a significant amount of funding and effort to get it up to grade. There's actually a deed restriction on about 4 acres of that site on the northwest corner of it. In addition to that, there is a rail spur that's unrestricted, that has only stop signs on it that would impact the site. So Union Pacific will likely have some concerns and require a significant amount of investment prior to that site being developed. So the Cincinnati site, I do think has potential. We've told that, we mentioned that to the Planning Commission and to the board that site will be part of our ongoing process to look at fulfilling affordable housing requirements.
How many acres is it?
It is, I believe, there's 2 parcels. I believe it's about 18 acres in total. With those 2 parcels, it might be actually a little bit larger than that. But when you look at development constraints on that site, what we were looking at is somewhere around 10 acres as well, maybe a little bit north of 10 acres. So there's work that we're continuing to do. We, as I mentioned, have initiated an amendment package to the Sunset Area Plan to allow for that site to be rezoned. And we'll be bringing that forward to the Planning Commission and the board later this year.
Oh, no, it's not one. Oh, that's me. I'm losing parts. You need both of them.
Next question.
And I'm sorry, there was a first question there too. Remind me one more time.
The in lieu fees.
Oh, the in lieu
And,
fees.
as it was pointed out earlier, if we continue only requiring a contribution with over 100 units, and if we allow them to just pay, pay a fee instead, how's that? I mean, is the county looking at changing?
Not currently. We're not looking at changing our housing. We're not looking at changing our housing ordinance currently. I know that we're going to be having workshops in front of the board about our housing program, so that might be something that comes up. But currently, we do have a housing division. They are responsible for administering our affordable housing fees that are collected. There are a few developments, including the one that I mentioned in Penryn, that might be the recipient of some funding to make happen, as well as other projects at the government center. As I mentioned, we have a significant number of units attributed to the government center. We've recently completed a project with Mercy Housing for an affordable housing development at the government center, but we still have about 400 or so units attributed to the government center. So those are funds that could be used to help incentivize and subsidize the development at the government center and other areas.
I want to make a comment. If you don't remove that loophole, the only entity that is going to benefit out of all this horse crap is going to be the developers, which has all been the only thing that has been benefiting from developing things in Placer County for the last 30 years. That is a shame. And it's a shame that you can say that that's still in effect and you're telegraphing to me and everybody else that you have no intention of addressing that and closing that loophole. And that's bullshit. We wouldn't be in this situation if that wasn't allowed in the first place.
Submit it for new business at the next meeting. That's
Hey,
reviewing the
anyone else
housing.
in row two?
Ordinance.
All right, so we'll start on row three and we'll since you can handle it.
I'm Jerry Ballback. So, first of all, I guess, the posting of the notices of the zone was done very late. A lot of these people would have gone to a lot of the meetings earlier. So any properties you identified right off the bat, even though you eliminated them later, they should have the signs up right away. It's like your guys are trying to hide and not let people know what's going on. So first of all, I think you need to address that, and county should change their regulations or whatever on when they actually post the property. I believe another comment period was due today. You said tomorrow. I think it's today. 1 week, 7 days. What's that about? Like, who can respond and even know about that within the right time? Respond. Was that a state thing or a county thing?
It's a state 7-day public notification process. It was included in all of our staff reports that went before the Board of Supervisors, that we would post on our website for a 7-day period prior to submitting to HCD. Now, certainly that's just a notification and an ability to comment on that draft housing element amendment. But certainly there's going to be other opportunities to provide public comment on that housing element amendment.
Yeah, so I think that wastes too short of a time, and if it was a state thing, the county should push back and say 7 days is not enough time to respond. Also, agreeing with Ron, I believe Amber earlier, although I disagree with developing lot 26, all these other smaller lots need to, if the county, I guess the state says they don't have to build low income, can the county require them to build low income? So what Gary said and Ron, and I think Amber, that we won't have this problem, just kick down the line. It's like Gary said, it's just you know, it's the free thing for the developers. So why aren't you looking at that already?
Yeah, again,
No, I don't know, why aren't you looking at it already? So your department.
Yeah,
You're the head, right?
I'm the head of planning, yes. So what we would be, currently, all of the sites would be subject to our affordable housing ordinance. And so, as I mentioned earlier, if they're over a certain size, they are required to produce a certain percentage of affordable, at 10% affordable. And if they're not over that size, then they would be able to pay an MVP.
Yeah, but so you need to get rid of that. You need to get if the state allows them to build it without requiring it, the county needs to step in and say, okay, we're going to comply with the state. You have to build low income housing on these smaller lots, not 26, on the smaller infill properties, not on that one. And last comment, just from my perspective, it just seems to be like you're going through the motions. All the people commenting or writing in won't really matter. You've already got your mind made up what they're going to do. That's my impression.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you for mentioning the planning part of this. My name is Cindy Wisco. I've had the great good fortune to be a property owner in Granite Bay for 50 years, my family, and dealt with Chris Schmidt on property development going into the Jura. The discussion then was, what is Eureka Road going to be? Chris said it's going to be a 2-lane rural road. And I welcome all the folks that have come here to enjoy the lovely Granite Bay lifestyle that we enjoy. And it's been a battle to try to keep it the way it's not the way it is, but at least having some sort of rural nature in this area. Wanted to make sure before I put my gate up that my front yard was going to be taken away. And it's a 2-lane road, as I understand Eureka. They have increased the speed limit on Eureka Road, which they had some traffic study, and now I have 33 houses going in behind me. And there's 22 two-at homes, so like 44. And all the egress is onto Eureka Road. Let's raise that speed limit. And now I watch the people try to get their kids to school on Eureka. It's mayhem. So, and also I'm watching all the development that's going in, which is great, it's gonna happen. But why not, right now, you make some of these houses that are going in affordable? Why not? It's crazy to me that you aren't already taking the development that's going on, and maybe the trim is less.
They don't have as nice of windows, whatever, what makes them affordable for that developer? You've already got that going right now. Can you not change that? If you can make us have to give up lot 26 by May, can you figure out how to make some housing affordable in all this construction that's going on around here? No. I just say that for projects that have already been approved, they already have their rights. So what?
Future entitlements has that power. Future entitlements has that power. So when you would pay attention to the entitlements queue of what's coming on project.
Okay, respect, ma'am. You have your time. You have the first one right here. Anyone else in the ladies? Yes, sir.
My name is Jared Spicer. I live directly across the street, on Greenleaf Court, right across from lot 26 there. I've got 2 kids that are in the school system, so I won't rehash everything that people have said about the dangers that I feel being right next to the school, crime, all of that, traffic. I mean, that intersection is going to be complete chaos, and then you'll eventually have eminent domain where you'll widen the road and take more of it, so that'll happen. But my biggest thing that I think is important to identify, I think it's on page 19 of the Appendix F report. They scored all of the sites, and this is their #1 site. This is
Oh, yeah.
this is the #1 site, and so the accountability, well, because it can hold the most units. So the accountability challenge for me is like how, like, and I think, Chris, I think you spoke eloquently on it earlier, but we have this deficit now, and then we have this, we're 60 days away from this deadline. And now it's kind of just being jammed on it, and it's like, we can't let this one go because this is the biggest mover of the needle for that. And respectfully, the question is, how does it serve the people that live here?
Right.
It doesn't, that's what I got.
Dan, anything? Oh, real quick. Raise your hand. If you got a comment. Pearl.
Sure, what we're going. I first wanted to mention that, in 2020 is when the draft housing element came out. Suzanne was not here, okay, so I wanted to say this is per viewers doing. You put that in, it's in conflict with our community plan. You have 3 levers: scope, schedule, and resources in any project. You come up 7 months before a project is due, and you've had since 2020 draft, and say you're out of time, and it's this big push for time. That is not good project management. The people of Placer County should not have to pay for that. You come up with an RM30, which is creating a loophole. So the county actually produced this, the previous 5 supervisors, 3 of them are on the board now. You come up with RM30, which creates a loophole that has a use for senior living. We have 12 senior living centers in Granite Bay. Have those been counted against our high density for RHNA? I would ask that, okay, so we have high density, we've already accomplished that here. So I think that should be asked. Also, a much simpler solution rather than rezoning the entire RM30 and 6 community plans. Why don't we just have a zoning text amendment that where you already have multifamily and commercial, where it's already expected to have impacts, why do you not just increase the density there? You said the county can do that. So it would make more sense. You're pushing millions of dollars in the Sunset area, 55 million from beds. And in addition, you put money into Lincoln, and you put money in Auburn. So I'd like to read what I put down for HCB. I respectfully request that HCB not approve the housing element in its entirety. HCB needs to provide justification of the RHNA numbers and the shortfall in the latest housing element. The state auditor actually said that they're doubling their counts.
So I said in the last meeting.
Yes. So, and then I said HCB should grant an extension to include Placer County owned properties in the shortfall, amend the Sunset Area Plan, include specific plans, and for Placer County to evaluate a zoning text amendment. So I don't understand why none of this has happened. You've had 3 to 4 years to do this. So for you to say that you, and in the DEIR, you had community properties in there, and I think it was table 7, and you pulled them out and you didn't explain why. Why are you going to rural residents when you had all these county-owned properties? You had time to buy properties, any property you wanted. You have millions of dollars. Why didn't you buy property or come up with something that was more feasible? Thank you.
Row 5.
Planner and have a lot of experience with CEQA, and so I appreciate Supervisor Jones and the board's consideration of this is that, and on the first time is that there's not going to be any repercussions from the programmatic document, it's just that it's a programmatic document, and so writing comments on that, it is an environmental document. If there's not an environmental effect, you don't have to consider it. So the things you guys are raising, like traffic, safety, the public services, if they already exist, there's a fire station, we can reopen it. And so they don't have to consider the environmental effects. What does make a difference is you all hearing our concerns, and I hope Supervisor Jones that you hear not an angry mass, but a concern, for citizens that this is, I'm all for smart planning. I am a planner. This just isn't the right design, and the minimum zoning requirement is what's the problem, not the maximum. You could do up to 30, but the requirement for a minimum of 20 is what's really concerning. So appreciate you being here. And
Okay, it's time for Zoom people to have their say. They go last since they got to stay at home. Everyone on Zoom who would like to make a comment, I'd like to ask that you raise your hand. I'm going to start calling on that. Diana Newman, please unmute your mic and make your comment.
Oh, she's still.
Hi there, am I there? Hi. Lots of great comments tonight. So my name is Diana Newman. I live at Granite Bay Estates Mobile Home Park. I'm the trailer trash that's right down the street from you guys. I've been there a couple of times. This park was purchased by a corporation a few years ago, or supposedly, but anyway, we were purchased by new owners. Our rent has gone up 10% every year since they came here. This place has become a slum, and it's because we are now owned by slumlords. I don't even want to get into everything that's gone on around here. What I can tell you, and it's a good one, and I hope it makes everybody cringe. If you live on Granite Cove Drive, the reason why your backyard smells is because of our sewage running into your backyard, and they don't tell anybody. Yes, we have called HTC several times. Yes, we called the fire department a number of times when it's actively running down the street. So my question to the board is, what and how are you going to vet these people that are going to own these properties and put us under rent conditions? How are you going to vet them that they are at least decent human beings that will maintain their properties, that will treat their residents with some amount of dignity? If anybody there would like to drive by our park, you'll notice that our gate is chained open and has been for almost 2 years now. It does not function. When they attempted to make it function because they didn't follow the plans that they gave you, the council, they didn't follow those plans. That gate locked us close. So it locked some of us in and some of us out. It happened several times. It happened at 102-degree weather to a number of us. We were locked in here or we were locked out. We were told by the owners of this park, you can sit and wait for that gate to cycle through its system, and then you can come in for over 20 minutes. Or, and here's a really nice degrading thing that we were told, you can go over to Rayleigh's, park there, and walk home. This is what happens when you let slumlords come into your community. We're not bad people, but the people that own this park are treating us that way. So please find a way to vet the people that are going to own these properties. And I know you think you have a few mandates that will do that. They found their way around them. Our park manager is not a park manager. She's called a community leader. How fruity is that? And you know what? Because she's called that, and that's her title, she does not have to go through the mandatory training that a property manager has to go through. That's how they work around it. So find a way to vet these people that are going to own these properties. Otherwise, you're going to have a bunch of slums. Thank you.
The phone caller with the telephone number starting with 925, could you unmute the mic and make a comment?
Hello?
You go ahead. State your name for the record, please.
Yes, my name's Darlene Betancourt. I live in Hidden Lakes, Granite Bay. Yes, a lot of good comments tonight. I would like to mention really quickly that I thought it was a little curious, the criteria in choosing Site 26. That's the site that I'm concerned about. Like the landowner raised their hand and it was grabbed by the planners and they hit the lottery without considering the massive problems with that site. So I just want to read the letter I wrote to Suzanne Jones today. I drive the Auburn-Folsom corridor daily, along with thousands of others who live here or commute through this area. I'm very familiar with the existing traffic patterns. The impact of potentially 700 plus more vehicles with multiple trips per day, including into the thousands, will dramatically change the already heavy traffic in this area, impacting 3 major intersections at Eureka, Fuller, and Douglas. Also impacting Cavad Junior High and Folsom State Park traffic, which backs up down Douglas past Auburn Folsom. This project would also impact tourism to include the state parks and thousands of cycling enthusiasts that come here to bike Folsom, Granite Bay, and Auburn. The neighborhoods of Oak Knoll, Lake Ridge, Lakeland, Lakeview, and Hidden Lakes are at times landlocked now. We often wind through adjacent neighborhoods to get to our homes during the summer with Folsom Lake traffic. All the surrounding neighborhoods off Auburn, Folsom, and Douglas would be directly impacted. The new residents that would occupy this property would likely be commuters unless there are 700 jobs in Granite Bay available now. Could you please seriously take another look at this project? I don't think Granite Bay residents deserve the negative and detrimental impacts forced upon them by this development. There are other locations that would be less impactful to existing residents, traffic flows, and neighborhoods, especially when this is clearly a location that would require commuting. Is that smart planning? I would hope that Auburn Folsom Road does not turn into a Bidwell Parkway planning disaster. Planners have a very important job. The decisions that are made cannot be undone. Please revisit the decision on Site 26 and 34 and consider the impacts of that decision. And to the lady who mentioned the fish and wildlife and the Fish and Game being involved, I also think that the Audubon Society would like to know about this situation as well. Anyway, that's my input, and hope you change your mind on lot 26.
Tom, Janice, would you please unmute your mic and make a comment or ask a question? Tom, are you there?
He's muted. He's muted.
Tom, you need to unmute your mic and make a comment.
Go to the next person.
Go on in the next one. Bio break. Yeah.
When you gotta go.
Would you unmute your mic and?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, Steve Irvine, I live in Granite Bay, right off of Fuller. I've lived here about 30 years now. My first question is, you gave us until the March the 7th for input. Is everything you've heard tonight going to be recorded? Is it going to be transcribed and read into the record for consideration?
No. So the March 7th date, is the date for comments on the draft housing element amendment. So we will be collecting, comments on the draft housing element, if they are provided, via email. And those will be transmitted to HCD along with that package. We do have additional opportunities for public comment. I mentioned those a couple of times. We have a meeting on April 25th in front of the Planning Commission, again, tentative date, and May 7th for final action, but there will be public comment period there as well.
So what you said was you're going to submit this to the state, and and everything we said tonight doesn't count.
The purpose of today's presentation was to give an update on.
Honestly, because you're about to say no.
This is comment.
I'm saying is.
Let him answer.
Today's presentation was to provide an update on the program and provide information about the program.
Okay, so your request for information and public comment is being done in front of the community planners that give you advice on your community plan, the regional plan. So why isn't all of this comment that you've heard being considered and considered as input into your planning process? I believe it should be. I believe legally you have to accept it. This is a public meeting.
Let me respond to that, okay? This came to our attention, this is Supervisor Suzanne Jones. This information came up and there was a request by constituents to please include this informational item on this Granite Bay MAC meeting. As of last Friday, it was not, and it was because of the request on Monday that we agreed to include this as an informational item at this meeting. That is the only intent of this meeting, and that's why I asked the planning director, this is the head of planning, to come and, field questions, answer questions, and gather ideas, if you will. And that's the extent of it. So no, this has nothing to do with fulfilling a requirement, your requirement, everyone else's requirement to make comments that we'll do today.
Okay, so the Granite Bay MAC is not allowed to use this and take action on it. But nonetheless, the Planning Commission and you as supervisor have heard all of these comments, and I respectively submit they should be included in the record. There's no reason not to. Number two, the state's 7 days is a minimum, not a maximum. So given the fact that the date was set for the last day that the MAC could meet to consider this, I want the date extended so that we have time to take this record, take the comments and transcribe them, and then submit them for comment.
The comments have to be in writing.
No, there's nothing in there that says they have to be in writing.
You're planning.
Yeah, in order for us to transmit them to HCD, they need to be in writing. If we can mention to HCD that there's this meeting that occurred and there's a video of that meeting, we can mention that certainly and be glad.
And is there, can we go beyond March 7th, or do we have to stick to this minimum date or
Yeah, what I would say in response to that is that we have indicated that we would do a 7-day review period, again, to meet the requirement of getting the comments in or getting the package into HCD, getting a response. They have a 60-day review period before we move it forward. And in order to hit the May 15th deadline, we're using that 7-day review period, 7-day notification period. Again, more opportunities for public comment at Planning Commission and the board.
But you plan to go ahead and submit to HCD all this information, given going back to February 13th, the supervisors specifically did not accept your plan. They told you to go back. They didn't say remove sites. They said explore opportunities and find some more sites. Specifically with respect to 26, you were told to look for something else. I was at the meeting, I heard it.
So I'd like to
Oh,
request.
hold on.
Move to call.
Nate,
Yeah.
hold on. You're out of order. It's for comment.
Nick, I do have a question for Suzanne on this.
Yeah.
So Suzanne, since we weren't able to get this as an action, which was our desire, is it possible, A, to get an extension now that the Granite Bay community understands the implications, even just of the housing element alone in those two programs that we talked about? To get an extension to include all comments, so we have time to take the video, transcribe them, all that, because all of the wealth of information, and make it consistent with the DEIR deadline, which is, I think, March 15th or 18th. Is that a possibility, Chris? Just because this
I think
has such an impact.
I
to
think what
Granite
we
Bay.
can do is we can provide the comments to HCD, we can package it together and provide it to HCD through the video. Again, the 7-day period was provided to the board directed staff to package up and post for a 7-day period. That would be a decision that can be made by staff to say we're going to extend that period.
So would it require a full board decision to
Yes.
change that?
Yes.
Direction by board, but if I understand you correctly, you can submit written comments to the planning commission, so you automatically get an extension to that planning commission to submit your written comments.
Absolutely. So just to review that again, we have until March 18th for comments on the draft EIR. There is a 60-day review period with HCD on the draft housing element amendment. So there could be comments provided directly to HCD. They will take those comments. And then in addition to that, you have the April 25 Planning Commission meeting where they will make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. And then you have the May 7 Board of Supervisors meeting, all of which there's opportunity for public comment.
So we can we take this up as an action item next month?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is not the type of item that is actionable.
If the planning commission is gonna make a recommendation, aren't we allowed to make our comments to the planning board through an action item?
Move for an emergency meeting.
Well, we've got to make sure this is something that there are only very specific things that a MAC, an advisory board of the MAC is within your purview to take it as an action.
And the point would be to advise the planning commission on it.
And the
Right.
board.
So
And after to amend the housing.
Excuse me, I would like to speak. You're
Okay.
super helpful. I appreciate it. So Suzanne, could we though, it sounds like Chris said he would be able to transcribe all of the comments via video. Did I hear you say that?
I'm not gonna transfer.
I mean-
Everybody, you sure they use an AI? Yeah, I go to meetings all the time.
Hold on, sir.
So, yeah.
Go back to the question.
I'm trying to get to a good outcome here.
Excuse us, please be quiet. She's talking.
So Chris, it sounds like.
We're on your side, but
Your
please.
staff could summarize the key issues and that could be packaged with the housing element update, which is submitted to the state prior to the DEIR.
Yes.
Correct? Yes, because I don't want this to have to wait till the DEIR, because then all of this substantial commentary would be missed in this very critical part of the process.
Yeah.
So it sounds like yes.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And then can I just say one other thing that then maybe the planning commission hearing is April?
It's looking at April 25th. This is tentative.
So then maybe, because it is normal for the MAC to do action when there's something implicating the community to make a recommendation. Can we try to get an action item, Suzanne, on the April MAC to make sort of a recommendation for anything going into the planning commission meeting?
We will pursue that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Council allows.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna be checking with county council.
we could at least check though.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll check with you.
It sounds like that would be an amenable
Mhm.
solution. Everyone's feedback is taken into consideration in this first round, and then we'll work to get another item added. Okay.
Okay.
And I just wanted to, no, oh, sorry.
We still have 2 more comments, can we?
Oh,
Yeah, let's take them.
This is pertinent.
And then we'll
No,
come back
no,
to
no.
the board.
And
Yeah.
Bertrand had a question too.
Yeah, I do. Ron brought up something. Thank you, Ron. about in lieu fees that you receive from contractors. Why do you receive in lieu fees from contractors?
Well, we gotta table that because there's more discussion to come after. We have to finish, public comment.
Okay.
We did.
Yeah, then we'll come back.
I don't have somebody else on there.
No.
Go ahead with your.
All right.
Yeah, so, under the affordable housing ordinance, projects that are under 100 units have the option of fulfilling the requirement through the payment of in lieu fees. So there's a dollar amount per habitable square foot that they would pay, and that money would be used by the county to build affordable housing projects.
I'm assuming the county has some, excuse me, some funds set aside now. Is it possible to purchase property in areas that are like Placer Vineyards or someplace like that and work that into the planning plan of that? Have the county buy it, let a developer develop it?
I'd have to check on what the restrictions are with the use of the funds, whether or not they could be used to
Purchase property?
to land bank property. I could check on that and I can report back the next time we meet. I would mention, since you said purchase in Placer Vineyards for, as an example, one of our specific plans.
Yeah.
That they do have an inclusionary requirement in Placer Vineyards where they do have to build, actually construct development, and they have pretty significant development triggers as part of their development agreement.
I
to
use that
produce-
for, just for an example.
Yeah.
But yeah,
There's no in lieu fee in Placer Vineyards?
No,
It's because it's over 100 units, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, only developments under 100 units pay the in lieu fee, which is a lot of development.
they have a
And it's- yeah.
construction requirement. It is a
Yeah.
little bit nuanced. They can transfer density or transfer units among the different developments, but there is a build requirement, not an.
Okay, we've been going for over 2 hours now. Everyone's had one round of public comment. I think we're gonna close comments on it.
Four comments, final?
You got one final one?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I don't know if anybody else does, okay.
I do, yeah.
Okay, so, going back to the whole concept of planning, basically, you can study this. This is not just a California thing. This RHNA is going on across the country, and you'll read articles on it. It's always focused on up zoning urban areas. We are taking a very suburban, semi-rural, and we're trying to put very high density urban stuff here. You said that none of the parcels actually had any plans on it. I don't think that's really true because the Munier parcel, and this is where I want to talk about planning, the Munier parcel, which is on Old Auburn, is adjoining other parcels that if we were really doing planning work, which we're going to do on the 25th, we would look at that whole section along there because you've already rezoned some other stuff for higher density and say, let's expand Old Auburn. This parcel 26 is just way too problematic. You have an opportunity. Let's do planning, not just picking.
Chris, question on the question about doing a zoning text amendment to increase density in existing medium density. It's a question I've asked, haven't gotten an answer. So do you know why we can't do that then versus rezone? Why can't we increase density in an existing medium density or commercial mixed use and just get the units there?
That would be an actual, we would have to actually rezone those properties and that they would be subject to that rezone. If we were to just take the RM, for example.
Right.
And allow up to 30 units, then we would have to, then I still go through and identify specific properties for inclusion on our inventory. I should note that for the people that have been sort of along with us for this ride at multiple public hearings, there were a number of properties that were zoned RM. I know that you all heard a lot of people complaining about the Florence Lane property in Auburn. That's actually a multifamily zoned property. And so the intent for some of those properties that were zoned multifamily was to just go up to, as you're suggesting, just go up to 30 units per acre.
Yes.
But there's obviously a significant amount of concerns from some property, some neighbors of properties with sites that are zoned RM. The other ones were the sites on Edgewood in Auburn, already zoned multifamily, just going up to the 30, right? Significant concerns of increasing the density up to 30 for existing multifamily properties.
But,
So,
right, but even.
and
Yes.
I'm sorry, just to
Yeah,
add on
yeah.
to that, one more thing. I know there were comments about the issue isn't as much the maximum density, it's the minimum density, and I think that is relevant to this discussion. Because we are a larger jurisdiction, a larger municipal or metropolitan jurisdiction as defined by the state, we do have to establish that minimum density of 20 units per acre in order to count the sites on our housing inventory. And so that's been part of the challenge because currently in our RM or multifamily zoning districts, there is no minimum requirement, but there, in order to include it on our inventory, it has to have a minimum of 20, maximum of 30. That's the only way to include it on our inventory.
So was that,
Question also.
Hold on. It's question
Yeah.
from the board.
yeah, so, it sounds like it is actually possible. Was that though included as an option at the board? No, I guess I just.
Not to wholesale rezone every property that is zoned to multifamily.
But the
to
county
allow
could
for-
do that actually.
But
without-
selectively.
Right?
We,
Do you have the authority to do that?
to change all, sure, to change all multifamily properties
To increase density?
increase, but then set a base number of 20 units per
Okay.
acre. That would have been the only way to count those
Good.
sites on the
Got it.
inventory. And obviously you have a lot of property owners that would feel that that would be impacting them because currently there is no minimum density on an RM zone property. A property owner with an RM zone property can build one home on their RM zone.
Okay.
property currently.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking though, back to the planning philosophy, like
And
at least those were zoned to be medium density or higher. Versus a very rural community that wasn't intended to be high density, so. I just don't know why it's not in the EIR as an alternative. It's nowhere, I've never seen it as an alternative, and I think it's a misfortune along with the Cincinnati acres, which I know. I know the situation there, so thanks for addressing that. That's it, Nick.
Anything else? No? Okay, we're gonna close this item. Next is correspondence. Do you have any correspondence? Nope. Okay, supervisor's report.
Thank you.
Okay.
This is the best part.
No, a couple of things I do want to address, for Chris. I know everybody's attacking Chris. Why haven't you done this years ago? This all started in what, 2018 or 2019? That was 3 years before I was on the board. How long have you been with us, Chris?
A year and 2 months.
A year and 2 months. And so I've got to put a lot of the blame on our predecessors because the blame really lies there. We were pitched this thing. I was on the board for 5 months and staff who is not there anymore said, well, if you just approve it later on down the road, we can tighten it up with your updated community plan. Okay, I'm new, I'm, on the board and I'm accepting this as being honest and open. Well, it turns out it wasn't. And this person told me and a number of constituents in my own conference room. So there's been a lot of things kind of amiss, I would say, but the fact of the matter is now we're stuck with this thing and we have to do the best we can. I really appreciate all of you coming here tonight. I appreciate all your comments because I'll say it again and again and again. I don't know how to approach issues if you don't tell me what you think is a problem with it. So always email me or something and let me know what the issues are because I cannot work on it if you don't tell me. Some of the things that were asked of Chris is, well, why can't you just do this? He can't just take it upon himself to do this. Our Board of Supervisors has to direct him to do this and to do that. Now, one of the issues I've had along with all of this is that my concern that we allow our developers to pay in lieu fees instead of building their required affordable housing, okay?
And so I'm gonna kind of put that on our predecessors as well, because if we had been building our required affordable houses over the last, even just 10 years, I don't think we would be having quite the deficit that we have right now.
No, we wouldn't.
We have a huge deficit because of that. I have not ever agreed with our in lieu fees, and I've asked planning staff to please investigate other jurisdictions, what the requirement is, or if we even have to allow in lieu fees. You know, and I've been talking to county council as well, and I'm finding out a lot of things that there may be a possibility that we can just do away with in lieu fees. If you've got a responsibility or requirement to build, then you have to build. But I've also recommended that, you know, developers who are coming into our community, especially out in that wide, vast open spaces, you know, in the west side of the county, if all of these developers over the next 20 years are going to be building, you know, hundreds of homes, I mean, they projected 8,000 homes in the next 30 years. So maybe they should start talking to each other and thinking about a 5 or a 10-year plan. You know, hey, Joe, I gotta build 20 affordable units, and Bill's gotta build 30 affordable units. Maybe let's start talking about sharing parcels, and maybe we figure out part of that area out there where we build a nice community where we put all of our affordable houses, just like they do in a development. You've got high density, lower density, and low density. They do it like that. And then they all start talking and sharing and planning for the future, where they have a place where they build their required affordable houses and build it such that they've got open space and they've got parks, just like any other nice neighborhood. It's just that they're affordable and they're not, you know, $1 million homes. And to come into Granite Bay and say, we want to build, you need to build affordable housing, for gosh sakes. All of the developers, and I was on the MAC when a lot of this stuff was approved that is just being built or finishing build out. You could ask all of the developers and they said, well, it's not really affordable. We call it achievable. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll let you know, if I had to buy my house today and not 33 years ago, it's not achievable for me, you know? And so there's just so many issues, so many things going into this thing. And I do think, you know, as a board of supervisors, there's a lot of things we can look into with regards to things that are tying their hands that we need to look into, you know, and so that's just kind of where we're at. I really appreciate all your comments. I've made a lot of notes there myself. I think you probably have staff online that are taking notes.
I'm sure we have a few staff.
That's what I was thinking. They're back there. They're taking notes of everything you're saying. This is recorded and this will be translated. So it will make it possible that we could package this thing, I believe. So I just wanted you all to know that, please, that.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, you bet. My chief.
They allow me to talk.
Well, you've already had 2 times.
Can you state your name, please?
For the record.
So she is your county supervisor for District 4, but she does not have a magic wand. She cannot do nothing by herself. It takes herself and 2 other members of that.
Three votes to pass.
Yeah.
Well, because they're.
Write letters to them.
Yes, you write letters to the other supervisors and ask them to support you in District 4.
Yeah.
Ask them to support you. Don't say support me, say support you, because you are the ones that we are serving. I'm not doing it because they're paying me millions of dollars. Although my opponents would say that's not true. Brady, I will allow you one question.
Well, and it's a question and a statement. Everybody should know that at the last meeting I attended, Suzanne asked property 26 be removed.
I fought to have it.
Jim Holmes also made a request for several properties.
They got removed.
And they got removed. Why is 26 still on there?
Well, that's a long story. We can't really even go into it right now, but I fought vehemently at that board meeting to have property 26 removed. And I will have to tell you that the property owner of property 26 kind of chewed my ass, because that person said, we want this on that. We volunteered, we want this on the rezone. So I'm torn. Hear the property owner, you know, you all are private property owners. Would you like somebody coming to you and telling you what you have to do with your property? That's kind of a dilemma, right? And then I have all of you who are saying, take that parcel off. I will not disagree with any comments I heard here tonight. I will not, because I feel very much the same in a lot of situations that you spoke about. So I think we discovered some way we might be able to pursue this from things I've learned here tonight. I will just say, we will try to pursue it. I can't promise you anything, but, but I just want you to know that I am working for you, and I have not turned a deaf ear to any of this, and I really appreciate it. Yeah.
I remember on February 13th that you pursued 3 times, 42 Cincinnati.
Yeah, well, I think that's a perfect parcel, and there's issues with county-owned parcels in, I can't remember the details, but we won't go into that, but I also.
I was saying.
Yeah.
You.
I also think that we have other county-owned parcels. They might not be big enough, I don't know, they might not be feasible. But that is something that the Board of Supervisors would also like to pursue. So, because that's what I think, Mercy housing is built there on the DeWitt Center, which is county-owned property. And if you've ever been up there to see it, it really is a very nice looking apartment building. And so I think it is smart that if we have to have high density, perhaps we should look into building on property on the county-owned property first, before we start going into the neighborhoods. And I agree with a lot of things. But I want to thank you all for coming. I don't want to keep you all night. So, but if you want to, talk to me more or something like that, or email me, give me all your items.
Meeting adjourned.
All right.